Good evening. I always hate it when I have to clear my voice before the show because there's almost always that instance when, like that, I have to clear my voice and get the pipes up and running. How is everybody? Good evening. It is Sunday night, and look at that. We have a beautiful beast behind us. Yes, we are in the season of Leo, and we're going to get into the sign, the people, the energy tonight. Normally, last weekend, we would have broken it down and given you the Leo juice. Shout out to the Leo King, by the way, and our good friend Darlena, the Leo Queen, the human design pal, who's I think probably due for another visit here fairly shortly, and bring her back on and talk some more human design. Anyway, if you're a Leo out there, happy solar return. Here's some sparkling lemon, which is like the sun, to you. And Leos never misses an opportunity to celebrate their birthday. And if you have the opportunity to go out and hang out and celebrate a birthday with a Leo, I highly recommend it. It'd be a lot of fun, especially if they pay for the bill. Because they are generous sometimes. When they're feeling really good, they're generous people. When they're not feeling so good, well, they can be pretty down on themselves. It's a very complex sign in a lot of ways. It is, of course, ruled by the sun, which is theoretically the center of our little tiny gang here, known as the solar system. Then everybody revolves around the sun. So there are some Leos who do believe that everybody revolves around them. And in some cases, they might be right. As we go through sort of the rogues gallery of Leo personae, you'll find that there are a number of Leos who are, well, borderline royalty, kings, lords, tyrants, dictators. A couple that come straight to the top of the list are Fidel Castro, Napoleon Bonaparte, Benito Mussolini. That's just off the top of my head. I guess you could throw maybe Bill Clinton and Barack Obama in there, and of course we will at some point. Especially on the latter, because we're going to get into the forensics around the death of Tafari Campbell. Now, these are astrological forensics. These are things that we can and will look at by the end of tonight's show, and this includes Tafari Campbell's chart, the rough time. It's very now. I have to do a bit of a disclaimer here before we get into that part of the show. I'm working with basically 4 charts that are, I don't have, number one, how credible is Barack Obama's birth chart, right? I just, it's just not, it's not all there, right? And even when, okay, so when I first started working with Barack Obama's chart, if you go back to my website, which I used to have a lot of really accessible articles on the website, and I've been actually reaching out for some help on the website to try to figure out a way to surface those things more, because I have a lot of content that I did over the years. Before I did this, I did a lot of writing. And in fact, from roughly 2008 till about 2015, 7 years, maybe 16, 7, 8, 9 years worth of, very intense writing. And I think the second, I think it was the second astrological piece I did was on Barack Obama. It was either the second or the third astrological piece. And I remember going through, and this is very early on. This is in, I believe, August of 2008. So we're into the presidential territory, maybe July, August. This was right after Sarah Palin had announced that she was, or it had been announced that Sarah Palin would be the Republicans' candidate for the vice presidency, which took everybody by surprise. That was it was a William Crystal choice. Bill Crystal, of course, the son of Irving Crystal, the notorious neocon and one of the founders of the neoconservative movement in this country. And he thought that she would be a good person to be on the McCain ticket. And so it was like, who was she? Who was Sarah Palin? So I did an article on her chart, and it just went through the roof. It got picked up by all these websites, and this was before. It's a long time ago. I mean, this is way before YouTube was a thing. And if you had a blog, I mean, that's how you reached out to people, was through a blog. I started to podcast 2 years later in 2010. And that's when I think it was maybe late 2009 or 2010. So, but before that, for roughly 2 years, I was doing nothing but writing. And that's how you were able, that's how we communicate. And now we're doing, 2-minute clips on TikTok, or, people are doing really short clips on YouTube. And so it's completely changed. And even the amount of astrologers that were around, because there were astrologers back in, obviously, in 2008, but not all of them were using the internet. I mean, a lot of them, there were some, don't get me wrong, there were some, they had websites, and they were putting their horoscopes out there and writing about astrology, but there weren't a ton, right? A lot of astrologers back in the 90s and going up into even the early 2000s, they were more traditional. I mean, they may have computer programs in order to like figure out your chart, but they didn't really have websites, or if they did, they were published astrologers. Like, who was it? Was it Ralphie Finn, the aquarium age, had a website. So there were some people out there, but it certainly wasn't like it is now. So I think I was part of like maybe second wave people doing astrology on the internet. And now it's just a completely changed game. But I think it was the second piece that I did, it was the second or third astrological piece. It was on Obama, because he was like in the race, right? He was the guy. And I'm like, well, who is this guy? Now, I had so full disclosure here. The minute I saw this guy, Obama, the first thing I did, and of course they had Google back then, which was much better than it is now. Now it's just a waste of time. But the first thing I typed in when I saw Obama was, Obama is the Antichrist. I didn't even know anything about him. Okay, it was just like an intuitive hit. It was my 2-4 splenic projector kicking in, and the amount of results I got was mind blowing. I looked at like, holy shit. This guy is kind of FOB, also known as fresh off the boat, and yet there were a number of people who were having the same kind of sort of cognitive leap that I was having in that moment. Like, wow, that's really interesting that we would have this many people with these many search results. So I decided that I was going to do Obama's chart. And of course, again, back in the day, you would look around, and it wasn't built out. Like, there was no Astro theme. I think Astro.com was around. In fact, I was using it. It was, again, an early site. But they didn't have the amount of charts that they do now. And it wasn't Lois Roden, but it was somebody else. It was one of these kind of grand dames of astrology. And she had put up which she believed to be Obama's chart. And that's the chart that I used for the very first time I looked at his chart. And to this day, it's the one chart that makes the most sense to me, because there was no birth time. And even now there's no birth certificate, right? There is a, what is it, record of birth or something like that, but it is not a quote unquote legitimate birth certificate. So I use that chart, which I had as a Scorpio rising with Neptune on the ascendant, which to me kind of feels more appropriate. And one of the things I'm going to do tonight is maybe I'll go back and look at that very first article that I did on Obama. And it really had a lot to do with this one image that was popularized at that time. And it has to do with water. It has to do with the ocean. And it has to do with Obama emerging from the ocean. And I was pretty convinced that they were pulling like a page out of Kennedy's book. And there's an image of Kennedy when he's, I think, running for president, or he's just been elected president. I forget where the sequence is, but it's fairly early on. And he's on a beach and he's wearing swim trunks. And there are all these people around, especially women. And I thought to myself, wow, here's Obama, but he's kind of outdoing Kennedy in some ways. Like, it's clear that Kennedy is taking advantage of the environment, because the ocean is a really, really powerful symbol. And if you do things in, on, around the ocean, it takes on a much bigger spirit, right? And so with Kennedy, Kennedy was such a collective and archetypal president, and he's the first TV president. He's huge in that regard. So, being on the beach, being a part of like youth culture and beach culture. Remember, the Beach Boys are starting to get popular around this time. They have surf music, really kind of cagey, for Team Kennedy to go in and actually, tap into that, right? Obama is different. There's nobody around him. I'll bring the picture up later, and I'll kind of go back in time and I'll show you my post on Obama and what I think was significant as it relates to the Neptune. Well, it was actually Scorpio rising with Neptune on the ascendant, right? And in the light of what's happened at Martha's Vineyard and Edgerton Pond, if you could call it that thing is pretty big. It's like a fucking lake, right? Neptune on the ascendant begins to make more sense. They've always had Obama as Aquarius rising. Once they sorted out the birth, proof of birth, I guess, controversy. And I guess maybe you could make a case in your own way that he would be an Aquarius rising. But my experience with Aquarius rising people is that they have really bizarre and unusual things happen to them because of their Uranian rulership. I've seen this a lot with Aquarian rising people, and particularly double Aquarians, or people have Saturn in Aquarius in the first house, sometimes Mercury on the ascendant. Every now and then you'll find somebody in the Uranus on the ascendant that's like that as well. And if you look at Obama's, 8-year term of office, his post term of office, well, his whatever his post presidency, it doesn't really fit the profile of being an Aquarius rising, unless you take into account what happened on July 24th, which is the unfortunate drowning of Tafari Campbell. Because you'll see that with Aquarius rising people. Now, of course, he is a bit of a revolutionary, right? I mean, we know that. So that kind of fits the profile. When you look at his chart, he has his sun in the 6th house, which for a Leo does make, based on like his credo, America's going to lead from behind. That's a sun in the 6th house kind of sentiment. It's not going to be out front, And even his statement of, well, if I could just, lead the presidency from the basement of the White House, I would do that. It's kind of a sixth house sun, but it's also something very indicative of Scorpio rising with Neptune on the ascendant, where the intent of the individual is kind of murky and clouded. And let's see, so if he was a Scorpio rising, that would put Taurus in his seventh house. And so we'd go Gemini in the eighth, Cancer in the ninth, and then, of course, the sun would be in the 10th house, which would make sense, right? Because he's a Leo and he would be president in the world. I think it makes so. Tonight, though, we'll go with the Aquarius rising chart just for the sake of, I guess, consistency, right? But we don't have a time. I mean, we really, let's be honest. The whole thing with Obama is not going. The birth thing is just, it's not that solid, right? It's just not that solid. Michelle Obama has no birth time, according to what I've sort of peered around. And does that surprise you that she would have no birth time? Because it's going to be some degree of a birth record, and maybe the name on the birth record might be different than the actual person itself. We're just speculating a bit here, but again, no birth time. Tafari Campbell, I do have his birthday. No birth time. I kind of rectified his chart a little bit just to see, what it would look under a certain ascendant. And then even the time of the passing. So we don't specifically know what time. They basically said the 24th of July. So we're gonna use the 24th as a date. We're gonna get into all that stuff. And so it's all, again, with a bit of a disclaimer that everybody in the story does not have a recorded birth time, and if they do, the recorded birth time is controversial at times, and perhaps illegitimate at worst. But we're going to get into it, because once you start to play around with synastry, you can see where planets are lining up. Let's just say, for instance, that the day is right on Obama's birthday. Maybe the place isn't right, but let's just say, for instance, it is. And again, maybe the time is altered, but we can see the planets on that day and where Tafari Campbell's chart lines up. And it's very, depends on what you call surprising. There's certainly some surprising connections there. So we're going to get into that. All right. That's going to be the sort of part 2 of the show. It's called a tease, and you need to stick around for that part of the show. We're not going to give it to you up front. So we also do the chart of the moment here. So we kind of look at where things are, where they're going. We'll check that out and get into that. We'll look at Leos tonight, famous Leos, and just kind of recap where we are. It was a couple weeks ago where I started to talk about how things were just going to get absolutely weird, right? Really, really weird. And can we agree on that? Can we agree on how weird things have become? And look, we're just getting started here, okay? We're just getting started. From the amount of time that I said things are going to get weird, we have a very high strange Saturn and Pisces passing on the Obama property, right? Saturn and Pisces, it's important. File that away. We have the strange catatonia of Mitch McConnell, who clearly suffered some kind of a stroke. Like when so you saw the frozen Mitch, Yertle the turtle, deer in the headlights. Somebody caught up with him later and asked him questions, and the left side of his mouth was drooping. The guy suffered a stroke. Now, I know this woman came up to him and tapped him, right? There's the lady in yellow who comes up and taps him. And And some people think that she's the one that put him in a trance. She may have been there to actually activate him to see if she could wind the guy up, and maybe it backfired. So how weird was that? Just watching him just sit there, and then the people around him just acting like it was no big deal. They just kept either sort of legitimizing it by smiling and waiting for him to say something, or in the case of the guy behind him, kind of mocking him and leering, right? Weird, just like high strange. And then we had the exchanges between the congressional aides, right? Like the guy with Grassley, who like doesn't fucking blink the whole time, and it's like he's like beaming into Chuck Grassley's mind. And then you have Stacy, what's her name, and her aide, right? Plaskett, Stacy Plaskett, and her aide, who looks like Odo from the Star Trek series, the shapeshifter, and starts mouthing every part. Now, some people say she's on the spectrum and she understood the entire speech. Well, it's weird, right? I mean, the whole thing is weird. And it's only going to get weirder. It's just, now you have Greta Thunberg saying, well, the only way we can save the climate is by saving the banks. Like, what the fuck is she talking about? And when did Greta Thunberg become an expert on banking? I know she's a Capricorn, so I'm sure she's very involved in politics and high finance. But again, we're dealing with this, like, we're in the high strange is only going to get higher, and we even have a bit of a brief respite with Pluto retrograde, and going back to the Pluto return one more time to the U.S. And once it goes full bore, past the 2024 election in November, and I do think we will have an election, and I think it'll probably be the last election we'll ever have, as we know it in this country. It's just going to get even weirder, okay? And and I said it before, there's going to be evil weird, and there's going to be good weird, and then there's going to be stupid weird. Stupid weird can be both stupid and evil, and sometimes stupid evil weird can somehow result in good weird. And we'll see it. Like, you'll see it. You'll see stories that are miraculous, strange but miraculous stories that fall under the category of good weird. And you'll certainly see clearly evil weird, right? Like, we did a show on Friday with Russ and this guy Rex Heuermann, Rex of course being King, also known as Leo, and that's evil weird. Rex Heuermann is evil weird, right? He's just evil weird, and it's just the whole totally bizarre story, and a lot more than meets the eye. So this is sort of the tenor of the time, and of course, what happened here well, not here, but there on Edgerton Pond on Martha's Vineyard, ladies and gentlemen, we classify that as weird, like high strange, and something that this is why I don't think Obama is an Aquarius rising, even though we'll use that chart tonight. If he was an Aquarius rising, there would be more things that would happen like this, and maybe there were, and we just didn't see it and just didn't know it, that it was all kind of under the wraps of the Secret Service. But when you look at the trajectory of, and again, this is just what we know, right? The things that we know, not the things that people speculate on or talk about. And there's plenty of that, trust me. But the things that we know, it's all highly controlled, highly manicured, and not really weird. But there is an event in Obama's evolution and his rise to power, which has to do with the unmasking of Jack Ryan, who is Jerry Ryan's husband. Jack Ryan was running for senator from Illinois, just like Obama. And he was married to the actress Jerry Ryan, who played Seven of Nine on Star Trek. She was the Borg chick. And it's such a weird combination, right? Because she's like big and busty, and they turn her into this sort of Borgian android. It's like that was all by design, literally by design, right? Anyway, um, so the story there is that they were getting a divorce, and he's running for senator, and the guy's kind of a shoo-in, right? He's the all-American guy. I mean, he's named Jack fucking Ryan, same name as the hero in all the Tom Clancy books and movies, Jack Ryan, same name, right? So I believe it was the Chicago Tribune that released the details of their divorce, which should have been completely locked up, lock and key, right? Boom. But no, they didn't. They didn't. They released it, and it turns out that they were into Jack Ryan was into a whole Eyes Wide Shut scene, and wanted to bring Jerry Ryan into it and do all this other stuff. And I told this story before. I actually was at a bar in Austin. I wouldn't say I got drunk with her, but we had a few drinks. I had a few drinks with one of Jerry Ryan's friends, who grew up with her and was, I think, part of her wedding. It was really a trip, and apparently, like, this guy hid his past from her the entire time, and then he started to bust it out, and then of course he wasn't just into like man on woman stuff, right? It was kind of anything goes, and that's when sort of the dam broke, and she couldn't handle it. She wanted to divorce him, but by making that public, he had to drop out of the race, which meant that Obama was a shoo-in, right? So that's a lot of that's Uranian. That's Uranian and Aquarian. It's a long way to get there. But by and large, we haven't really seen that. Everything with Obama has been as tightly controlled as the scripts on his teleprompter. So I think he's probably a Scorpio rising. And when we get to that part of the show, I'll dive into that. No pun intended. Okay, let's see what we have here. Let's see. We got a bunch of people. We got live. We got a robust 250 people, which is great. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. And let's see who we have. Oh boy, I got to scroll back a bit. There's my man Michael. What's going on? DJ MC, Tomas Jordan. Big shout out to the mods. Hey, JR, Jeff Rosen video. What's going on, JR? Good to see you here. Woman who runs with wolves. Veronica's barn. How about that? Susie Gemini. What's happening, Susie Gemini? Deborah Wheeler's here. Meow meow. President Moo Wow. Okay, Sue is here. What's going on, Sue? Good afternoon to you. Susie the Sea Goddess. There she is. Let's see. Who else do we have? West Coast checking in. Nevada, 17. First time I had to sign it off from work since Easter. I've been here forever. Well, we're glad you're here. Nevada, good to see you. Let's see. Marge is here. What's going on, Marge? Hey, okay, there she is, the lovely and talented one, Dr. Joan S. Representing. Let's see. The Crimmies are here. Another death by climate change. Obama wanted a front row seat for the ocean rise. That's pretty witty. That's one of the things that they talked about with his choice of living quarters. Well, geez, don't you think that the oceans are going to rise, and the big, beautiful mansion that you bought in Martha's Vineyard is going to be underwater? No, not really. Not really. Look at that. Got some love for Veronica's barn. Love it. Okay, who else do we have? Let's see. Mary Lee. What's happening, Mary? Road Trip 1981. Checking. Sherry Anilani. What's going on, my Cherie? Good to see you. Who else do we have? That was me. I chime in. Hey, Ani Brito. Ani Ma. We get an Ani sighting. Good to see you again, Ani. Krista Royce is here saying hello. There's my man, Ryan, the president of the International Woodworkers Union of the World. They are not communists, by the way. They're one of the few non-communist unions. Steve Letro's here. What's going on, Steve? Checking in from the East Coast. Good to see you. LMM, Leela will be at our event. That's right, October 13th. Go to my website. I've been having some issues with my website, and I'm hiring somebody to come in and clean a few things up, and some of it has to do with some of the presentation pieces. You can go on my website, and if you want to, you can sign up for the event. The information is there. And Leela's going to be there. She's going to be presenting on Sunday night. She's going to do live demonstrations on tremor release therapy. And if you saw her on my Friday show, it is an absolutely fascinating system for releasing trauma. So we're going to get a live demonstration of that over the eclipse. It's going to be a great weekend. Celtic Queen is here. What's happening? CQ. Let's see. Who else do we have? Hanging Laundry. Hanging Laundry is hanging out. Warrior of Light. Whoa. Good to see you. Let's see. Who else do we have? Robert, haircut mid-month wedding. I need haircut too. Yeah, Steve, I got to get a haircut as well, man. It's been a while. But, I have to say that at least tonight it's laying okay. It's laying okay on top of that. Wendy Eater, the beautiful one. The beautiful one. Cancer new moon hit. I got 4 under contract this week. Wow, there you go. Congratulations. Lewis Walden. He is the absolute king of Southwest Florida when it comes to real estate. Right on, Lewis. Glemma Spank. Glemma, what's happening? Good to see you here. Leos aren't my favorite. I think it depends on the Leo, Depends on the Leo. It depends on how good the Leo is feeling about themselves. Everybody has a sign that's kind of kryptonite, right? For whatever reason. It's usually a sign that's either square or opposite your own sign. Let's see, who else do we have? Kelly B checking in, our 90s gal. Cubs can never be kings, but they can win a World Series every 100 years or so. Let's see, Liddy Lou. It is hot in Texas. Man, oh man, oh man. It is boiling. Leo King about to be a daddy. I know. Brianna, GFX. What's going on, Brianna? Brianna is one of my secret weapons right now. Can I do that? Can I do that little wink? In a good way. More on that later. Good to see you, Brianna. Maria from France. I always think of France as a very Leo country, by the way. Leslie, hello back at you, Leslie. Good to see you. And who else do we have? Chaos Engagement. Barack Obama always seemed more of a Cancer than a Leo to me. That's a really, I actually was like trying to figure that out about Obama. And I hear where you're coming from. If I were actually going to confer a sign to Obama besides Leo, it'd actually be Virgo. He reminds me more of a Virgo. He doesn't have, like when he's younger and you see him in Hawaii and he's got the fro and everything, that's kind of the Leo hair, right? But for Leo, the guy has not had a full head of hair for a while. I mean, that he doesn't have the sort of the Leo profile on the hair side. I don't think he is, when I think of Cancer, and even Cancer men, I think of Cancer men as being kind of barrel chested, and he definitely does. He's not barrel chested. He's got that weird kind of speech impediment. He's a stutterer, and if he had an afflicted Mercury in Virgo, I could see the speech impediment. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't. Well, we're not in his company, right? Because he could be very Leo-like in private, right? Like he could be, like, I'm sure, extremely demanding. and very assured of his own self-importance. One day, will I look at Sinead O'Connor? Yeah. Um, she's a Sagittarius. She's born on the same day as Jim Morrison, born 1966. Maybe we could look at her chart tonight before the show's over. I'll take a request from you, Gaia Dance. Let's see. All right, why don't we get into the show? Let's get into. By the way, my show on Obama was the show that got me booted from Gaia, or I looked at all the various potential father figures, shall we say? All right, let's go over to Astro. Let's check out where we are. This is the part of the show where we look at what's happening astrologically, like where the planets are, all that good stuff. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to, all right, do that. So I had to get rid of all my cookies because I was doing something. I was working on hiring somebody for my website. So the website that I was in told me that I had to clear my cookies. And when you do that, when you clear your cookies, guess what happens? All your information goes away. By the way, I've had some great readings the last couple of weeks. Can I just share with you some stories from the front? I got 2 readings that I did over the last week, one this week and one the week before, that to me were just, I think they're, for me, whenever I do a reading or a session with a person, it's always gratifying. I always find something really interesting inside of a chart, inside somebody's life. It can be tragic, it can be heroic, whatever, right? There's a lot of different things that you can hone in on. 2 weeks ago, I had this young guy, Gen Z, and he was not going to take the jab, right? He was not going to take the jab, and guess what? He was in the armed forces. He was in the Navy, and I looked at his chart, and I saw his son, and his son is in the 12th house. I said, "So, were you on a submarine? Was that your thing?" He says, "Yeah, that's what I was scheduled to be on. I was scheduled to be on a submarine." Hello, sun in the 12th house, right? So he held fast, right? He held fast. He said, "No, I'm not going to do it." He actually managed to have a few other of his naval mates kind of join in, right? And they said no, and they got discharged. And here's the really interesting part, and I can tell you that they did this on purpose. They basically discharged an entire wave of people that would not get jabbed. Huge wave. They did them all at once, and then the next day they changed the requirements. How about that? The next day they changed the requirements. So it wasn't like he was just randomly picked off, like, okay, you go. There was a whole bunch of them, right? So I just had to, salute him for basically saying no, right? So this is, again, Gen Z, who can see through a lot of this bullshit. Pluto in Sag, Uranus in Aquarius, Neptune in Aquarius, a little bit Uranus and Pisces. They're kind of a different group. But it was like pretty inspirational stuff. And then open to astrology. Like, they're really open to astrology. And whenever I've had a Gen Z client and I explain concepts, and again, we're talking pretty young, like between 18 and 22, they get it. Like, they totally get what I'm talking about. And I know that, there's some crazy Gen Zs like ice cream, chili, hot, ooh, yum, yum. Clearly, we got a little Gen Z action there, like pretty far out. But as far out as they can be, it also gives them the ability, I think, to um, really look down on sort of what's going on down here. I mean, those are all really elevated aspects. Neptune, Uranus, and Aquarius, and Pluto and Sagittarius, right? They're really elevated. So they have the ability to kind of zoom out and kind of look down on the culture and see what's happening from, a 20,000, 30,000 foot perspective in a lot of ways. And I think that that's a really interesting counterpoint to the millennials who are so internalized. They are so internalized with, Pluto and Scorpio and going through the Sturm and Drang, right? And the churn and the burn, which is really what the millennials, that's what they do, right? They're like in the crucible, and if they're not, putting their own life in the crucible, they're looking around and saying, well, what can we take a blowtorch to, right? I mean, that's very millennial. And even with the very different Neptune, because they kind of like Neptune and Uranus are kind of moving with each other, right? For a while they're together in Capricorn, and then they move into very different in Aquarius, extremely different in Aquarius than it is with Capricorn. So with Capricorn, it's all about um, the radical is. It's really like when I think of Neptune in Capricorn, I think of like terms like decolonization, right? It's like dissolving, radically dissolving the political and social structures that have been set up through Capricorn. And I guarantee you that a large wave of millennials who went through the university system, whether they were going directly for a degree in political science or women's studies, or urban studies, not urban planning, but urban studies, they're going to get a education that would include these social Marxists. And of course, colonization and decolonization would absolutely come up, right? So these are two very, very different generations. So this guy was Gen Z. He totally got it. And he was really open to suggestions based on his chart. So that was a really good reading. And then I had this, and I hope I get them on the show. There's this guy, and he listens to the show. He's a great guy. He's really brilliant, this dude. And he has a son who is what we would call autistic, but he has worked with him on this letterboard thing. And his son is like completely advanced. I think we've got another Gen Z kid here, right? If I'm not mistaken, completely advanced. And he and his son are working together on a kind of new version of unified theory, string theory, and kind of a new symbolic language, like really fascinating stuff. The two of them together are working on this thing. And it's unlike anything I've ever connected with in terms of both the charts and the client and the story. And I hope at one point in time I can get them both on the show somewhere down the line, because it's one of the most fascinating things I've run across. And how and it's really interesting because we have this whole idea of what a soulmate is, or what a twin flame is. And a lot of us conjure up somebody that would be, in most cases, the opposite sex, right? And it would be somebody that we would like theoretically share life with, and sort of create like one being, right? Like one being. And when I looked at their charts, I began to question the idea and the concept that soulmates would, or let's say twin souls. We'll use the word twin soul. That a twin soul might transcend that model. Like it could be actually be like a father and a son who are kind of working on something huge together, and how one who is extremely well versed in the field, who is the father and who is articulate, and the son who has, according to his father, an absolute mind-blowing understanding of the nature of reality, but can't communicate it. That the two of them together are working on something really powerful. Like this is not just speculation and talking. Like they are actually like doing something, right? And when I saw that, I'm like, wow, I was blown away, right? I'm just totally blown away and honored to be able to have a situation where, I could, sort of join those two worlds together. So this is one of the joys that, this is a Leo moment, right? So we take pride in what we do. This is one of the joys that I get out of astrology, is actually working with people, and not just working with people, but I feel really blessed because I've been doing this for a long time. And if you're coming to me for a reading, I know that you're watching my material, or you're seeing what I'm doing, or it's a referral from somebody that has. And it cuts through a lot of the weeds, right? Because I think I may have had one or two people as clients who, and really not that many, one hand, who I could say were like kind of dyed in the wool liberal, but more on the new agey side, I think. Right. I've had a few. But not as many as you would think. So then the people that come to me are going to be different, and it's quite, I would say, fluid for me to be able to move into their charts and articulate what whatever. And I think that's probably true for a lot of astrologers, right? That if you're an astrologer and you hit a tone or you hit a note, you will have certain people that will resonate with it. And so therefore you'll have people that show up that, that have similar life experience or have a similar language that you'll share, right? I mean, I think that's just the nature of humanity in some ways, right? This is humanity operates on a vibrational level. So that's who would be my clients, would be people that would be in a certain spectrum of what I'd be able to sort of locate and communicate. And so it's cool. I feel blessed by the people that are the clients. So those were two great stories. One, this young guy, if you're an American and you're thinking, what are we going to do? Right. Or just a human, like we'll take it out of the American position. But I think these are ideals that the rest of humanity theoretically should share, that he stood. He stood on his conviction, and nobody was gonna knock him off his square. And he was okay with what happened, right? A little disappointed at first, but okay with what happened. How could you not like be impressed with somebody like with that level of conviction? And that was something he'd always wanted to do. Right? He'd always wanted to go out and get an education and see the world, which is really, what people did with the military, to this day still do. And then the other arrangement was just mind blowing. Anyway, let's get into the chart of the moment. Let's see, where are we? I'm going to do a full on chart tonight. I'm not going to just. My cookies got snatched. What time is it? 6:50. 6:50. All right, and the other town is San Antonio. San Antonio, Texas. I like San Antonio. I like it better than Austin in some ways. If you're an Austinite, please don't hold that against me. All right, here we go. I'm bringing out the big chart tonight. Leo, go big or go home, right? Theoretically, okay. Here we go. 6:50 p.m. Yes. All right, we're all lined up. So this is the chart of the moment. Let's get into it. Here we go. All right. So we're already 7 degrees into Leo. We're just 3 degrees away from moving into the second decan, which is the Sagittarian decan, and a bit more philosophical on the Sagittarian decan. Moon in Capricorn. So maybe we can talk about things tonight in that cool, kind of detached Capricornian moon sort of way, right? We got a grand trine. The moon is at 12, and we have Mercury and Mars, and we got a Mars moon exact trine. You know, it's interesting. Mars moon trines can be kind of smoldering, and like there can be some heat with Mars moon trines. Now, in the Earth sign, especially Mars and Virgo, which is it's pretty nervous, right? Mars and Virgo is nervous and um, kind of it's kind of borderline anorexic. Mars and Virgo. Um, and I've talked about some other stuff with Mars and Virgo too, and how there's a really like weird kink with Mars and Virgo. Like Kevin Spacey has Mars and Virgo. There's some strange people have Mars and Virgo. Um, and if you have Mars and Virgo, it doesn't mean that it's the totality of what Mars is. There's other things going on, but there's this weird kind of almost self-flagellating kind of um, quest for purity, right? But there's also this weird kind of restraint with Mars and Virgo. It's kind of Victorian, it's kind of hair shirty, it's kind of monk self-flagellating in some ways. But tonight, there's good flow between Mars and the moon. So emotional intent and action are lined up. We throw Jupiter in the mix, and we got a tight grand trine here, people. I think this is one of those nights where, hopefully when we get into the darker and murkier, not mercurier, murkier material. Say that fast 3 times. We'll have some clarity, right? We'll see big picture stuff, and we might be able to do it without a lot of emotional hand wringing. We'll do Jack Webb, just the facts, ma'am. So tomorrow, when you wake up, the all-important moon day or Monday, we'll have a transiting moon conjuncting Pluto. Oh yeah. And the sun is kind of moving out of the opposition. So tomorrow it's at 8. So we're at a 10-degree orb. Some astrologers and systems will, take that red line away, right? So tonight we're kind of on the outer rim of that Sun-Pluto opposition. Now, when we go back to July 24th, we'll see that opposition in a much clearer light, shall we say. So by the time tomorrow rolls around, we'll be dealing more with the moon on Pluto versus the opposition with the sun. And Moon Pluto conjunctions on a Monday as you're headed into work may not be all that fun. I'm just saying. I'm just giving you a bit of a heads up. Okay. There is a sense with Moon Pluto that there's an urgency, an absolute urgency to take care of business. And I kind of feel this too in some ways, that one's emotional well-being is connected to one's proficiency or output. And maybe it's just Mars and Virgo that I'm feeling, but I've been very, I don't use the word anxious, but it's like, yeah, I need to be more productive. I definitely need to be more productive. I can feel it. I can feel that Mars and Virgo generating and happening. So tonight, I think it's a good outlet for sure. Tomorrow, Moon Pluto, also we're dealing with issues of security, right? Issues of security, job security, banking, bank security. Our little Capricorn friend, Greta Thunberg, said we have to save the banks in order to save the environment. Okay, Greta. But I feel like that's part of what tomorrow's about with Moon Pluto. Look for banking news tomorrow. Look for banking news. Look for news about BRICS. Look for news about the dollar. And that's going to be news for days, weeks, and months to come. And so tomorrow, people are feeling it, right? They're feeling it. And by that time, the moon will have moved out of this grand trine. I think by the time we wake up tomorrow, it'll be what, about maybe 20 degrees. So it'll be out of the grand trine. It will be trining Uranus. We got a Pluto Uranus trine, and that moon kicks into tomorrow. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about instincts and what you're feeling tomorrow. Now, remember, you never really want to move out of fear. Like moving out of fear is, it depends on what the situation is, right? Fight or flight is a big deal. You don't, doing something out of fear and panic isn't always good. Doing something that is deeply instinctual and you are moved to do it, and you have checked, cross-checked, and double-checked, that is important. And I think tomorrow is one of those days. Right? So your people are looking, I think, tomorrow very quickly to secure assets. Keep your eyes on the banks tomorrow. Keep your eyes on what's happening in terms of money movement. You know, we've already seen the bizarre kind of wrist slap that Sam Bankman-Fried got, and they're gonna bring back FTX. They're going to bring back FTX. I would not be surprised if that was part of tomorrow's news cycle, right? They're going to bring back FTX. And I think if they do, that's a sign that you need to be really aware of what's happening financially. But tonight, it almost feels like, and I know it's really hot out there, and I don't really want you to stop watching this show, but there is like a high degree and level of productivity. And maybe you've been involved in it this weekend. Tomorrow, Mars will be at 13. It'll be in an exact trine with Jupiter. So it's not like you're going to lose the potential for productivity. It'll still be there. But the moon in Capricorn, I kind of feel the moon in Capricorn today. I'm kind of like, when I started the show, it was like, how do I feel? I always think about how I feel before I come on to a show. And tonight, I just felt like very matter of fact, very business-like. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, what'll happen once the show gets going? Will I warm up? And that's clearly part of the Capricorn moon. Is that over time, that Capricorn moon will warm up. You got a Capricorn moon in your chart, don't worry about it. Your best days are ahead of you. Even if you're in your 50s and even in your 60s, your Capricorn moon will be your best friend in the days and weeks and months and years to come. That's just the nature of the Capricorn moon. So it's really this grand trine tonight is it's a good one, at least for me to do the show. So tomorrow, look for opportunities, right? Look for opportunities. So sometimes work brings opportunity, and sometimes opportunity brings you work. And usually they're linked hand in glove. Bill Walsh, one of my favorite football coaches, once said that luck is when preparation and opportunity meet, right? That's luck. When you are prepared, when you've prepared yourself, whatever that is, and then somebody has an opportunity, you're ready for that. That would be luck, right? When preparation meets opportunity. And tomorrow's one of those days. Tomorrow's one of those days. So I hope for your sake in your workspace that it's one of those days where your work is paid off and you're given more, whatever that more is. Maybe it's more autonomy. Maybe it's more of a sense of supervision on your own or supervising others, right? Maybe it's an actual um, compensatory reward for your services, right? So one of the things that I would say here on Sunday night, as we move into Monday, is keep your head up tomorrow, right? Even though we've got this Moon Pluto conjunction, and it's going to get more intense through the day, and your concern or people's concerns about their home and their resources and money are going to get a bit more pronounced throughout the day. Don't let that dissuade you, right? Just keep moving forward with Mars, and have a, for lack of a better term, have a bright, productive, positive, roll up your sleeves attitude. Like tomorrow is kind of a go get 'em day. The emotional stuff will play out, right? It'll play out. And there could even be some really interesting, again, when that moon comes in and starts to trine Uranus, and we have this Jupiter Mars trine, don't sleep on your own best efforts. And I'll tell you, it's a lot of times now, we really, since COVID, right, when people were basically given money not to work. And then you have a large raft of people who are saying, well, why work? Like we spend all this time working and doing all these meaningless things just so we can, make a few coins while everybody above us is making way more, right? There is that attitude, and I understand it. I completely understand it. But this is not a day. Monday is not a day to have that attitude, right? Monday is not a day to have, and I'll tell you why. Because if you have that attitude, you can be passed over quite easily, right? There are people and there are businesses that are still looking for productive and proficient people. And I think you really want to start your quote unquote work week off on the best foot. And I think that this is a really good Monday to do that. No matter what your gig is, no matter what your gig is, if you're somebody that's involved in the healing arts, a Mars Jupiter trine could be really good for you. And you could look at ways to market your business and expand what you do. Right. So we have Mercury sitting right back here in Virgo as well, which is smart, right? Mercury and Virgo is smart. I think we're gonna get Mercury retrograde soon, aren't we? With Mercury here. Anyway, Mercury is really smart, right? It figures things out. So here we have Mercury and Pallas and Mars, and Pallas kind of, not quite at the midpoint, but tomorrow when Mars is at 13 and Mercury is at 3, Pallas is a little bit closer to that midpoint. And Pallas is all about pattern recognition, right? And this is all pro efficiency. And you can find out things very, very quickly. You can figure things out very quickly. You can act on them very quickly. So tomorrow's, well, Mercury's just going to get closer to Pallas. Pallas moves slow. So by the time we get 8 days out, roughly, we're going to have, I think, a Mercury-Pallas conjunction. And that's when people are piecing things together rapidly. So I also think that there's some very broad implications here for health. And, last week we had pretty early in the week, was it Tuesday or Wednesday, the news of Bronny James having basically a heart attack, right? 18-year-old kid having a heart attack. And where have we seen this before? Where have we seen young people having heart attacks and athletes just kind of dropping like flies? Hello, these are the pieces of the puzzle for Agatha Christie's health mystery coming to you right here, right? And you can feel it. You can kind of feel the heat a little bit. You can kind of feel the heat being turned up, and sort of the spotlight turning into a bit of a laser on people like Anthony Fauci and some of the people that have been just absolutely, um, I would say, militant when it came to information, the spreading of information around the carjack, right? And so here we go. Here we go. The other thing too, which is really interesting, is that when you look at last week and you look at Dianne Feinstein and you look at Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and Joe Biden, this people are talking about we have a gerontocracy, right? And I don't think it's going to go well here, right? People are getting a real insight into just how old these people are, and they're so old that they're having to have their hands held, and their words are being chosen for them by their congressional aides. I mean, that's been a whole Virgo theme, hasn't it, over the past week with Mars and Virgo? From the weird lip readers in the background of the guy with Grassley, never blinks, right? I mean, just fucking weird shit. And then even with Dianne Feinstein, you have her aide, just say I, just say I, just say I. Like, so when was it okay for a congressional aide or a senatorial aide to place a vote? Like, who's voting here? Feinstein's going off on some fucking tangent about, why the military needs more money. And all she has to do is just say I, right? And so people are starting to see this now. All this health related stuff, right? All this health related material. It's like, whoa, man. And the reason why those people are in those positions is because they're marionettes. The donor class supports that. They support people who are not independent. They are codependent. That they need their aides. They need people to move them off podiums. They need people to write scripts for them, right? They need people to write their speeches for them because they can't do it on their own. But we're going to have more insight into this with Mercury and Pallas. This is also really good for your own physical health and your own insight with your body. Heal or heal thyself, right? And I can go through chat. 95% of you are healers, and if you're not a quote unquote healer, you're probably deeply interested in healing, right? So this is a really, really good time here. Really good time to I would say expand your knowledge based on patterns, right? Patterns in nature, patterns in your body, patterns in general. Lots of details begin to emerge here over the next week. It says this week in terms of effort and time and energy, you will not be disappointed if you put it in. Spoken like a true Virgo, right? The sweat equity. I think it's good. I think it's good. Venus retrograde. What do you love? What do you love? This is what Venus retrograde is all about. A lot of people are like, well, these relationships are going to break up. Maybe if it's a fundamental disagreement and that you and the person that you're with don't love each other or don't love doing the same things or don't love sort of the same projected future for one another, right? Then Venus retrograde will take care of that. We'll bring that right to the top of the menu. But Venus is about relationship. And a lot of times it's not just a relationship, but it's a relationship to the sign that it's in, right? What do we love? What do we love? That is what Venus, it is your relationship to the things that you love and are passionate about. And the retrograde could be going back and like again, I'm trying to work with somebody on my website so I can get back to writing. I love writing and I haven't written in a long time. In the way that my website is set up right now, it's just not writer friendly. So this is what I'm attempting to do. I'm attempting to, make that part of trying to go back and bring some of that from my past into my present, because everybody is doing videos, and I don't mind doing videos. I love doing videos, and people are podcasting and streaming. It's fine. But I feel like writing about astrology and putting things on paper, you can just say things differently. So there's that. That's just for me, right? There's other things. I'm working on a new channel, which we're going to launch on Monday the 14th, called Sirius Sports. That's Sirius, Sirius Sports. And I'm doing this with Al Dog. Some of you may know Al Dog from Old World, Florida. Shout out to Longo. And so we're doing that, right? So why? Well, why am I doing it? Well, it's because I love sports. I've always loved sports. You know, I've got Jupiter in Sagittarius in my first house, trine Uranus and Leo in my ninth house, right? And I've got Aries in my fifth house, and transiting true node just went into my fifth house, which is sports, right? So it's like, okay, well, I love this thing. Now I love it more from the cultural perspective. Like, I don't really follow standings for sports, but I love it from the cultural perspective. And right now there's so much going on culturally across the board, and sports is one of those areas where you can kind of get an uncut sort of dose of things in a lot of ways. So anyway, that's just my version of Venus retrograde in Leo, and it has to do with your relationship to the thing that you love. And so people are re-examining this. What do you love? Not just who do you love, but what do you love? And the thing that you've been doing for a long time, do you still love it? Is it a long-term relationship and you just need to reinvest in it and recommit to it? Whatever it is. It could be a love relationship. It could be a relationship with your hobbies. It could be a relationship with your passions, right? This is Venus retrograde. And sometimes the retrogrades take, they take a little bit of nerve, because you have to ask really important questions. If you're really honest with yourself and check your heart, the Venus retrograde will lead you into places that can be ultimately revivifying. Like, you can renew your relate. That's what we talk about with retrograde. We just look at those first two words, like renew, reinvent, revivify, reimagine. And that's all part of the retrograde language. There's a bunch of other reason there as well, including reason, right? So this is, and we've just gotten started. I think it goes back to 12, Leo, and then it goes direct again. And I'm telling you, man, this is going to be a really interesting retrograde season, because by the time we get into Sagittarius season, that Venus is going to be in Libra, and that's really far behind the sun. Really, really far behind the sun. We're going to see the sun essentially go past Venus right now. Right now, you can see Venus rise in the morning sky. You can see it like it's the morning star. But as it goes retrograde and the sun moves in front of it, you're not going to be able to see Venus. The sun will rise before Venus, right? So Venus will be behind the sun. And so what happens there is that is literally a metaphor, right? So the sun, which is the self, is displacing or is moving its prominence ahead of Venus, which is putting it ahead of relationships. That's a big part of what's going on here. So again, you're going to have to look at, well, who am I in the relationship? Whatever the relationship is, the relationship with the relationship, or the relationship to a thing. And so guess what happens? At a certain point, there's a nexus where the sun crosses over, and your position and your needs will become more important in some ways to the relationship or the thing that the relationship represents. But that's not the case right now. But that will come. But in November, when the sun is in Sag, we're going to have Venus in Libra. Man, it's way back there, right? If we count Sagittarius as one sign, and we count Scorpio as another sign, and Libra as another, it's basically 3 signs behind. Venus does not usually go back that far, right? It's really interesting how far it'll be behind the sun. And that time in November, you're dealing with the sun in Sag, which is all about law, right? All about law. And then we have Venus in Libra, which is about fairness and balance and adjudication. And then we have that South Node. That's going to be in Libra. It's going to be a very interesting time. Very interesting. And from a legal perspective, it's going to be open season. And people that you thought probably would not be prosecuted or have to deal with the law will wind up dealing with the law. And there could be even laws, they won't be retracted. Venus retrograde will give us a sense as to how strong some of these quote unquote laws that have been recently passed in our lives will be, right? But that time in November, Sag season, fascinating time. Saturn goes direct during that time. A whole lot of things clear up in a lot of ways in November. It's also the last time I think Pluto moves direct, and it moves off of the final Pluto return for the United States. So November, Sag season, November is a really big time. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. What else do we have? Let's see. Uranus is at 22. I think the transit to watch out for is going to be the sun, roughly 14 days, 13 days when it moves into a square with Uranus. That Sun Uranus square. Wow. That's explosive. It's revolutionary. That's a revolutionary energy. Keep your eye on France. Keep your eye on France with that Sun Uranus square. It's about 13 days out. Let's see. It's also going to be starting to conjunct Donald Trump's ascendant. You know what was interesting about Trump? And I talked about this when Mars was going through his 12th house. And I thought, this dude is in danger. And even Alex Jones said it. Alex Jones said that they're trying to come up with a plan to kill Trump. You know what Trump did during that time? He laid low. He laid low when Mars was going through his 12th house. And I think I said it on the show a couple of weeks ago that Trump probably has an astrologer, because that would have been the absolute best thing for Trump to do. All right, what else do we have here? There's that true node, 28 Aries. Are you guys feeling the shift in the nodes yet? Do you feel a little more fuck you with the true node in Aries? Because the South node in Libra, you know what? I had an interesting experience. I'll share this with you. So I hired a house cleaner because I'm not your typical Virgo. Okay, so I hired this house cleaner, and she showed up one day, and she did a good job. She did a good job, And I've got a ton on my plate, right? I have a ton on my plate, and I forgot that she was coming the next week, and unless I write something down on my schedule book now, no matter what it is, because I got so many plates spinning, if I don't put it in my calendar, I will forget about it. And so what happens, a lot of times I'll be with a client, somebody will call me, and I have to leave my phone on just in case it's an emergency. But I'll just say, can I call you later? That's the custom. And I think it was one of the days where the cleaning lady was coming over, and I totally spaced it out, right? Totally spaced it out. And so she didn't come over. And I texted her, and it was really awkward. I'm not gonna lie, it was really awkward. And I apologized. I said, look, I'm really sorry. And she said, look, I took an hour and a half out of my day, and I scheduled it for you, and I couldn't get into your house. And I'm like, I'm really, really sorry. So what was interesting is that I apologized, and then I paid her for her time. And it was an interesting moment because I paid her, and with the South Node in Libra, right? It was like I just expected her to accept my apology because I'd spaced it out. And she didn't accept it. And it was a really interesting lesson for me. And it was in that moment where it's like, okay, the money was the apology. That was the apology. That was the Aries part. Who knows? Maybe she was an Aries. I don't know what sign she was. But that was the Aries part. It's like the money was the apology. And it was like I was sitting there. I'm like, okay, well, you got the money. I didn't even get a thank you for the money, right? Those are the notes. South Node in Libra, actions speak louder than words. So there's your true note in Aries, right? Like, do the thing, get it done. And I think we're all going to be learning Aries lessons, which are unapologetic. You don't have to be an asshole, okay? Like, I wasn't an asshole, trust me. But on the other hand, it was like really the only thing that mattered in that moment was the financial transaction. That's it. That's all that mattered. And because I've got 3 planets in Libra, I was like, okay, well, do I at least get a thank you for sending you the money? In fact, giving you more money than you asked for? No, no. And you know what? She didn't need to do that. That was my own sort of part of the social contract. You think, well, most people will just go ahead and, complete the circuit. And that was a lesson. No, not everybody needs to complete the circuit. Just remember that. So if you're hanging out there and you fucked up and you apologize and you're waiting for a response around the apology, like, no problem, no worries, you're good. You may keep waiting with that South Node in Libra, right? So what's the lesson? The lesson is you got to be in the moment. You have to be willing to act, and there really should be no there should be no stipulation for any kind of apologetic response or reply. Don't be an asshole, but don't go out of your way looking for it, because guess what's going to happen? You're going to find that you're going to be disappointed. And this is a lesson that we're all going to be learning over the next 19 months. Like, yeah, you could still have social graces and open doors for people, whatever, right? But that's not what this time is about. So if you're looking for something like that, forget it. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And you don't want to say, you don't want, and I'm just being honest, I kind of felt a little dumb. It's like, man, because I had an expectation that person would kind of get me off the hook, right? Because I fucked up and wasn't paying attention. And that person did not do that. It was actually a really good lesson for me. It's an Aries lesson. And they're going to be in abundance over the next 19 months. So file that one away, boys and girls. That'll be an interesting one. Okay, I think we're good here. What do we got? We got a Yod. Where's that Yod? Yeah, it's the Yod with Venus. Venus has moved back into that Yod position. I think maybe the Yod position will help us put on our Sherlock Holmes cap tonight, our deer stalker, and look at the broken path to the relationship between people, perhaps even people that are involved in a triangle, right? Which is what a Yod is. And again, on a personal level, with in conjunct with Neptune, there's a vague dissatisfaction with how things are. A vague dissatisfaction with how things are. And with Pluto as part of the inconjunct as well, it takes on also a deeper need or an almost obsessive like quality to untangle things to get to the bottom of why you don't feel impassioned or in love with the same things that you've been in love with for a while. And it's just the start of the journey right here with Venus retrograde on the tip of the Yod. All right. Peachy, how you doing over there? We got Peachy sighting. Peachy, hey, hey, you want to come over here? It's Leo night. It's Leo night. You want to come over here? You want to represent Leo? She says, I want you to represent my cat bowl. All right, let's look at some Leos. Let's get in some Leos tonight. You know, we had to say goodbye to Max the porch cat this weekend. And he's lived at this house for well over 10 years. And I've been here for 2 years. He was here 10 years before that. So he's an older cat. So we've been taking care of him because that was part of the deal when I signed the lease on this place, because they wanted somebody to take care of the porch cat. At that time there were 2, and now there's just Max. And I had to take Max to the vet last week because he was not doing well, not feeling well. And it turns out that Maxie is how do we say this? He's on a short life-term policy right now, and so the folks who have taken care of Max all this other time, i.e., the woman who owns this house, came with her kids and picked Max up on Saturday and took him to their home about an hour or so away, and that's where Max is going to live out his final days. Kind of sad. All right, let's get into some Leos. Let's get us some Leos here. So happy birthday to all you Leos out there. All you Leos. Let's go through the Rogues Gallery. I love this site because it really has sort of the greatest hits of every sign. Let's see if we can find some commonality here. Well, right out of the gate, we got Napoleon Bonaparte. Very interesting character. Watched the French Revolution as a witness, saw it all go down, and decided that he was going to clean things up at some point. Benito Mussolini, the man who got the trains to run on time, and the so-called father of fascism, which is essentially, if you look at the meaning of the word, it's a merging of the government with corporations. Corporations, of course, being the symbol of efficiency. Everything is based around efficiency and profit. And so when the government is merged with corporations, what it does is supposedly trims away the fat. So therefore we have fascism. Mussolini's an interesting character. And he was hanged in front of his fellow Italians. Coco Chanel. It's really, these are the top, 400? Is Charles E. Hires the 4th most popular Leo? Is he more popular than Obama? I'm not getting that. Malcolm Forbes, Orville Wright, one of the Wright brothers. Then we have 2 aviators back to back. Amelia Earhart looking an awful lot like a dude here. There are pictures of Amelia Earhart where she does look like a guy. And there are other pictures where she looks a little more feminine. This is definitely one of the more guy ones. I did her chart last week. And she's trippy, man. She's trippy. Her story is very weird. And if you missed the show, there's a very good chance that her plane was shot down. Very good chance that she was a spy. She clearly was she was married to this guy, George Putnam. And Putnam was a publisher and a promoter. And she was just really a prop for Putnam, pun not intended. But she also, I think, had she big, all these planets in Gemini, like in her second house. So I think she was a spy. And the rumor has is that the plane was shot down. She had a co-pilot who, of course, was a male navigator. And the rumor has it that she was actually returned and came back into America at a certain point in time. But that's another show. Uh, there he is, the man who we'll be talking about shortly after what we run through the Leos. Fidel Castro. So, are you seeing a bit of a pattern here? We have tyrants and dictators. Tyrants and dictators. Some people would say Napoleon was a tyrant. Some people would say Fidel Castro was a dictator. Depends on who you talk to. Some people would say that about Barack Obama. Some people would say he's the best president we've ever had, and they're still in love with him. Other people, not so much, right? So right out of the gate, 1, 2, 3, 4, notorious. Marcus Garvey, head of the Pan-African movement, back to Africa. Wilt Chamberlain, one of the most fascinating people I've ever run across. Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain is about as close to being a godlike figure. The guy was 7'1". He was a hurdles champion at the University of Kansas. He scored 100 points in a basketball game. His longevity with sports was just amazing, and I guess his longevity with the ladies was even more amazing. He's been quoted and on record that he's been with over 10,000 women. And you would have to think that somewhere along the way, there's a little Wilt somewhere, or maybe a not so little Wilt. But he has no children of birth, never got married. And if you ever listen to Wilt Chamberlain talk, there's some interviews with him out there. He's a fascinating guy. He's articulate. He's well read. He traveled all over the world. The dude was literally larger than life. To me, Chamberlain is the epitome of positive Leo. And it's fascinating. His big rivalry was with Bill Russell, and Bill Russell was an Aquarian. And so you had really that fixed rivalry between two centers, right? And that during that time in basketball, the center was everything. And they had these massive rivalries against one another. And Bill Russell was difficult, man. He was a difficult person. He was total Aquarian. And it's like, all these people just love Bill Russell and, just think Bill Russell was like one of the most important people in sports because of all the social stuff. Like, honestly, if I'm going to go hang out with somebody and during that time, I'm not hanging out with Bill Russell. I'm hanging out with Wilt Chamberlain because you're going to have a good time, right? You would have a good time. And he was generous. He was a really generous guy. He befriended Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he was Lou Alcindor. They're both from New York. And so, instead of like shutting down this next great up and coming center, he helped him out and they became fairly close. Alcindor went to UCLA. Of course, Chamberlain was a Laker. But Chamberlain was not an asshole. He was larger than life. He was the epitome in a lot of ways of a Leo sun. A lot of these guys were self-absorbed. Wilt had a little of it, but he was also incredibly generous. All right, here she is. Jan. Is it Marcia? No, Jan. Is it Jan? Yeah, Jan. Jan Brady. I always get the two confused. Jan Brady, Maureen McCormick. I always thought she was hot. Come on. If you were a kid growing up, how did you not think Jan wasn't hot? Jan was totally hot. And then you're looking at Marcia, like, Marcia, maybe you take the hair out of the pigtails and the braids out. Maybe. And remember, I'm a kid, not an adult. I'm a kid, so I can have these thoughts as a kid. And then I'm looking at Cindy. I'm like, Cindy's cute. Give Cindy some time. Let Cindy grow up a little bit. But Jan was a hottie, man. And here she is. She had that hair too. She had that long Leo hair, right? Because the other two, Cindy had the little pigtails, and then Marcia had didn't she have shit going on in her hair and braids and stuff? Jan was the only one that had the unfettered long blonde hair. This is Bill the Butcher. He's the guy from Gangs of New York who was played by Daniel, what's his name? And really interesting character. Total Leo, right? Like he was, man, what a character. And he was the leader of like the English firstborns, the true Americans. They saw themselves as true Americans, and they got into big hassles with the Irish. And very interesting character. Two gang guys right next to each other, Bugsy Moran and Bill the Butcher. Bill the Butcher had a gang, right? Mata Hari, the spy. Usain Bolt, the Freemason. He's a Freemason. Do you know that? But that guy's a total Leo, right? The golden orbs around his neck, the gold medals, those are golden orbs. Those are the sun. Leo, of course. Whitney Houston, poor Whitney, Leo. Tortured chart. She has a seesaw chart. And it tore her apart. Literally tore her apart. George Bernard Shaw, the socialist Marxist. Clara Bow, who supposedly did the entire USC football team. Barry Bonds is a Leo, and he's a weird Leo. He's got a son in the 8th house. So Barry's one of these guys who loves the flash, right? He's got the Leo flash. He's, got the earring and the cross, and and of course there's the steroid bit. But he also is a very kind of almost shy, retiring personality in his own way. I always thought Barry Bonds, and I grew up in the Bay Area, and I watched his dad play, Bobby Bonds, and saw Barry play for the Giants. I always thought Barry was a really weird guy. He was there was something really weird about him. And I'll hold the rest of my thoughts to myself. Erwin Schrodinger, the guy who popularized what Schrodinger's cat, and cats are Leo. Am I right about that? There's Walter Payton, Sweetness, the great one, also a Leo. Let's see. Hope Solo, Crazy Hope Solo. Of course she's a Leo. Look at that hair. She's got that big, bright Leo face, too. Look at that. Henry Ford, absolutely a Leo, right? So, the thing about Henry Ford is that he's an interesting character. But from all accounts, he actually treated his employees well. So one would like to think that he saw himself as kind of a paternal figure with the Leo son. But he certainly hated strikers. Rod Laver, famous tennis player, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mum, a Leo. Of course, Bill Clinton, a Leo. It's interesting that Neil Armstrong, who is a Leo, was the man who supposedly landed on the moon, right? So when you see Armstrong, who's the first man on the moon, you see alchemy, whether you believe it or not, right? You see alchemy. You see the sun and the moon. It's an alchemical operation between him and the moon, right? And there was this weird thing that happened. This is back when Obama was president, and they went after Lance Armstrong, and I always thought it was really interesting that this name Armstrong was connected to these three characters who shared the same name. And you had Jack Armstrong, who was a comic book character, Jack Armstrong, the All-American boy. And then you had Neil Armstrong, right? The man who set foot on the moon, a hero at a time where there wasn't really a lot of heroes. And then you had Lance Armstrong, who was, again, this guy who dominated the Tour de France and all these other cycle events, who's a Virgo. And then they went after Lance Armstrong, which I believe was intentional. I believe going after Lance Armstrong was intentional. That was the Obama and the Obama administration. And they went after him. Why did they go after him? They went after him because of the connection with Armstrong, and that he was at that time. Now, look, he was also an asshole. Lance Armstrong's an asshole. And yeah, everybody who was peddling was on fucking steroids. I'm sorry. It's the way it was, right? But he was a target and they wanted to take Lance Armstrong down. He was, how do I say this? He was an apex performer and he represented America's dominance. He represented America's dominance in a sport where Americans weren't dominant. He was also sponsored by the Postal Service, which again was very American, right? And so what did we see during those 8 years of Obama was the deconstruction of American values, this whole idea of leading from behind. So Lance Armstrong was part of the body count, right? It's all connected to the Armstrong name and the perception of Armstrong through the ages. Mae West, of course, she's a Leo. Tom Brady, Mr. Uber Leo, Sun Saturn conjunction, total Leo, right? Couldn't walk away from the game. Couldn't agree to a Saturn opposition. And did I gloss over Bill Clinton? He's a total fucking Leo, right? Total Leo. Here's another Leo, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, it's interesting. Tom Brady was accused of cheating, right? Like Deflategate, all that stuff. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's a fucking cheater too. He was a cheater. Arnold Schwarzenegger used steroids. Let's be clear about that, right? So Barry Bonds, sorry, used steroids. Steroids, you know, Walter Payton died under really weird circumstances. Like there were people who claimed that Walter Payton had AIDS. And I don't know what happened to Walter. But steroids, right? Steroids, Deflategate, steroids. You got to win. Win by any means necessary. There we go. Madonna, total Leo, right? One name, Madonna. That's Lurch right there, Ted Cassidy. I don't even know if Madonna is still alive, honestly. I mean, she apparently they had to bring her back with Narcan or Narcan, that Narcan stuff. And you haven't heard peep from Madonna or her people. She's probably still hooked up to a machine if she's still breathing. Like something severe happened to Madonna. Then you have Haile Selassie and Menelik. They were both leaders in Ethiopia. Selassie's a trip, right? He supposedly is descended from David. That is Haile Selassie's blood legacy. And supposedly, you know, according to the Rastafarians, Jesus and God on earth. I mean, that's really Haile Selassie's role. When things got hot in Ethiopia, he went to England and spent a lot of time with the English nobility and peerage and intellectuals, and they helped foster Mr. Selassie's growth and education along the way. Jason Statham, of course, he's a Leo, but he doesn't have the Leo hair. Stanley Kubrick, a Leo, shares the same birthday as Aldous Huxley and Carl Jung. We talked about that this week. Hitchcock, a Leo. J.K. Rowling, Leo. Who else do we have? Coolio, hair, God rest your soul. Leo. Kylie Jenner, Leo. Herbert Hoover, liked to wear wigs and dress up in women's clothing. That's kind of Leo. It was all an act. Who else? Trevor Berbick, the boxer. We'll run across a few boxers here. Doc Holliday, Leo. Lucille Ball. Of course she's a Leo. Come on. Doesn't she fit the profile? The big hair, big personality, right? Chris Hemsworth, Leo. Let's see. This woman apparently is very popular. I think I've heard one of her songs. That's about it. Guy Gibson, who is a spy and who I believe might have been the original 007. Is that right? Royal Air Force. A different guy. There's Guy Gisborne. James Hetfield, Metallica. Leo. Sandra Bullock. Some people think she's a dude. And maybe there's a reason why Jesse James pulled the ripcord on that. Mads Wilander, another tennis player, Leo. You're going to see some tennis players here, right? Tennis players, again, they're solo. The sun is shining directly on them in their court. Roger Federer, Leo. You're going to see also Vitas Gerulaitis, if I'm not mistaken, Leo. Jackie Kennedy Onassis, Leo. Louis Armstrong. He's a good Leo, isn't he? Gotta love Louis Armstrong. There are stories of him, like, he was very successful. But he never moved out of New York. He and his wife stayed in this house that they lived in for the entirety of his career. And he would bring people over, and they would do barbecues and stuff for the neighborhood kids. And he was apparently just an absolutely wonderful, sweet guy, right? And I would say he was probably the exalted Leo. Simone Bolivar, who in some people's mind is a liberator, other people he's a tyrant. Mr. Arthur Balfour, the guy who created the Balfour Agreement, which essentially set up the nation state of Israel. He's a Leo. He's got the temerity to do so. I am God. I can make those boundaries happen. Mick Jagger, of course, he's a Leo, born on the same day as Stanley Kubrick, Carl Jung, and Aldous Huxley. Hulk Hogan, definitely a Leo. Monica Lewinsky. I think Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, they both had their moons in Taurus. They were both Leos. And I have this theory that even though she was probably a spy in the House of Love, that they actually were into each other. Like, I think he was actually into her. Like, more so in a way than he was into any of the other Jezebels. No, I think there was a thing between the two of them, right? Like, I saw it astrologically. And unfortunately, it was unrequited love. Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark, Leo. Michael Biehn, the actor, Leo. Antonio Banderas, Leo, played Zorro. He's a very Leo kind of guy. J-Lo, wasn't she in a movie with him? A couple of Leos. Robert De Niro, of course, he's a Leo. Charlize Theron. Oh, torture. Charlize Theron and her mother killed her father. Supposedly her father was abusive. And the mother killed the father right in front of Charlize Theron. Talk about initiation. Let's see. Shawn Mendes, another pop star. Philip Seymour Hoffman, incredible actor. Leo, missed. Great actor. You'll see this with Leos. They're great actors. Speaking of great actor, there's Joe Rogan. He actually had some hair back then. Joe Rogan and Alex Jones are exactly opposite astrologically. August 15th, February 15th. Right? They're like the Bill Russell and the Will Chamberlain of talk. Robert Plant, of course, Robert Plant's a Leo. Look at the hair. Magic Johnson, Leo. Riddick Bowe, Leo. There's Vitas Gerulaitis, another tennis player, Leo. Andy Warhol, the hair, people, the hair. You'll always see him by there. Even Vitas Gerulaitis, Leo. Vitas Gerulaitis passed away. Little Pump, of course, the hair with Leo. Roberto Clemente, generous guy, was helping out with the victims of the earthquake in Managua, Nicaragua, and his plane crashed. T.E. Lawrence, Leo. That's Lawrence of Arabia, for those of you keeping score at home. Who else do we have? Adam Yauch, Beastie Boys, Leo. Claude Debussy, Leo. Benjamin Harrison, president. Very few people know a whole lot about, even though he was Leo. Matt LeBlanc from Friends. We got two Friends here. We got Matt LeBlanc, and we also have Lisa Kudrow, both Leos on Friends. I wonder if they were good friends, since they're both Leos. Steve Wozniak, Leo. Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man, also starred Beneath the Silver Lake, Leo. There's the aforementioned Aldous Huxley, Leo. Look at that. Is that William Clark from Lewis and Clark? So both Meriwether Lewis and William Clark were Leos. Isn't that interesting? When was Meriwether Lewis's birthday? August 18th. They're both Leos. You had two Leos leading an expedition together. Which one took the lead? Do you think they said, okay, today's my day? This is my week? All right, who else do we have? Alison Krauss, who connected with Robert Plant, July 23rd. She's got 27 Grammys. Holy shit. That's a lot of Grammys. When's Robert Plant's birthday? Hold on. August 20th. So they're close, man. You could tell, right? They're vibing together. August 20th and July 12th. Well, they're not that close. I take that back. But they're still Leos. They're still vibing each other. All right, who else do we have? George Clinton from Funkadelic. Famous guy, man. Gonna turn this sucker out. No, I'm just kidding. Deng Xiaoping, this is the guy who is responsible for the emergence of China in the 20th century. It was not Mao, it was Deng Xiaoping. He saw what the West could offer China. Leo. So he's a leader, right? He's a leader, and he takes China slightly out of the tyranny of Mao and sees that, hey, we can get some manufacturing money here. Jennifer Lawrence is a Leo. Oh, look, Meghan Markle. She's a Leo. Salieri, Mozart. We know that Mozart is an Aquarius. Salieri's a Leo. Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Aquarius, Leo. Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, Aquarius, Leo. Rivalry City, right? There you go. Scopes from the Monkey Trial, right? That guy. He taught evolution. Should have been Aquarius. Gavrilo Princip, who is really the forerunner of Lee Harvey Oswald in a lot of ways. There's weird shit that combines the two of them, including sandwiches and guns, and supposedly killing major political figures. Christopher Nolan, who is now shilling, he's totally shilling. He did the movie. Didn't he do Dunkirk? He did Dunkirk, right? Now he's doing Oppenheimer. He's shilling. He's shilling for the man now. Amy Fisher, remember her? The Long Island Lolita. Remember her? Didn't she shoot Joey Buttafuoco's wife? Right? Shot her in the face. You don't cross a Leo woman. I'm telling you right now. You don't cross a Leo woman. They will whoop your ass and shoot you in the face. Patrick Ewing was Leo. When I was going through this, I didn't realize Patrick Ewing was a Leo. Oh, Daniel Radcliffe and J.K. Rowling. There's connections here, right? Lewis and Clark, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, Daniel Radcliffe, J.K. Rowling. This is the guy that plays Harry Potter. Speaking of Potter, there's Beatrix Potter right next to him. How about that? Kenny Rogers, the gambler, right? And what do we think of when we think of Leo? We think of sports, pastimes, and gambling. Of course. You got to know when to hold him, know when to fold him. Robert Redford, of course, he's a Leo. Of course, I think he was August 2nd is his birthday. Anyway. Pete Sampras, another tennis player. So we're seeing some greats here with tennis and Leo. Slobodan Milosevic, another like king, autocrat, ruler, tyrant, depends on where you are in that spectrum, right? He's kind of in that camp. Hugo Chavez, there's another guy, right? Another king, ruler, tyrant, autocrat, dictatorial type. I'm telling you, man, if you want to be an autocrat, ruler, tyrant, dictatorial type, Leo's your sign. Remember, the Veek Remmerstrom is a Leo. You may want to just file that away. I'm just saying. Menachem Begum, another guy. This is the guy who ruled Israel for a while. Like he was the guy that did the quote unquote peace accords, right? Camp David. I think he also carved out his niche for his country there in a rather, how would I say, I think he had a generous portion of the pie. Bob Cousy, one of the greats. I would say Bob Cousy and George Mikan are the two first kind of modern basketball players. Tony Bennett, now a couple of weeks ago on the show, I said that by the end of the week, there would be the death of an American icon. And I kind of playfully threw Clint Eastwood's name out there, but it didn't have to be Clint Eastwood because we've talked about how there's this thought that when Clint Eastwood dies, that everything in America changes. But it turned out that Tony Bennett actually passed away that Friday. So, again, I don't like to do victory laps, especially when Tony Bennett passed away. But, I mean, he's definitely an icon, right? Ben Hogan, one of the great golfers, he's a Leo. Casey Stengel, the great manager, is a Leo. So Guillermo Villas, another tennis player. So if you have a kid who's a Leo, you may want to get them to take tennis lessons, apparently. Either that or have them read The Life of Napoleon and Bolivar and Fidel Castro so that they can set themselves up as a life of or Haile Selassie, right? Ruler, tyrant, dictator, king, president. Man, Leo is loaded from top to bottom here. Emmett Till, who apparently was dragged around for making a pass at a white girl, and young too, right? So his image and visage is emblazoned upon our story, right? And we have Ben Affleck, also a Leo. So Ben and J-Lo were Leos, huh? Are Leos. Interesting. I can just see Ben Affleck and J-Lo at a restaurant together, looking around. Is anybody looking at me? Who's looking at me? Who's looking at me? Who's looking at me? Let's see. I don't know who this guy is, but I'm assuming he's in the dictator camp. Gadi Maupassant, the great writer. Jerry Garcia. I know he's born August 1st. It's the birthday of my father. Let's see. Philip the Good. Philip the Good. We should have more names like that. Philip the Good. Let's see. We kind of have that in chat a little bit. Robert the Rascally. Bill Shoemaker. He was small, but he was a giant when it came to horse racing. Davy Crockett, Leo. Let's see, Dorothy Hamill. Love Dorothy Hamill. She was sexy. She made that haircut famous. She made ice skating sexy, I got to say. Another wrestler, Triple H, Alexander Dumas. This is the guy who wrote The Three Musketeers, right? That's him. James Baldwin, Leo. Steve Martin, a Leo. Interesting. Of course, Roger Clemens and Nolan Ryan, even though Nolan Ryan's not here, I can tell you he's a Leo. Both two of the biggest fireballers in baseball history, Leo. James Cameron, Leo. Of course he's a Leo. Dorothy Parker, the writer. Jane Wyatt, the actress. Bibi Bikila. He was a marathoner, right? And he was from Ethiopia. or no, was it Ethiopia or Kenya? I always get these guys mixed up. Abibi Bakil might have been from Ethiopia, but he was this incredible marathoner. And after he would do these marathons, he'd just blow everybody away. He'd start doing fucking sit-ups and he'd be showing off, right? He was totally showing off. And then I think eventually he became a cop. And then I think he got wounded and he was paralyzed, which is kind of fucked up. Leo DeRocher and Casey Stengel, two great managers, Leos. So managers are also like presidents, right? They're like a manager on a baseball team is like the king or the president of the team, even though the owner is really. Maurice Richard, the great hockey player. Speaking of great hockey players, there's Brad Hall, another Leo. Jack Haley, he was in Wizard of Oz, right? Halle Berry, Leo. Whatever happened to her? We haven't heard from Halle Berry in a while, have we? Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley, another great tennis player, Leo. Peter O'Toole, a great actor and an even greater drinker, Leo. Looks like Victoria Azarenka is also a tennis player, though I'm not familiar with her. The great Cecil B. These people are larger than life. Are you seeing a pattern here? Cecil B. DeMille is a director. He just doesn't direct movies. He directs the 10 Commandments, right? This is Leo. Go big or go home. That's what we're talking about here. Marcel Dion, the goalie. Annie Oakley, of course. We have Constantinus 2. We have Constantine 1, even though they're different. Danielle Steele, the romance writer. Maximilian II, another ruler here, right? Another ruler. Karl Yastrzemski, the Yaz. A lot of times you get Leos with just one name or nicknames. Madonna, Yaz, Wilt. Then you have Alex Haley, Mr. Roots, a Leo. Tennyson, the great Lord Tennyson, charge of the Light Brigade. We had a couple of Bachs. We were there right now as well. Francis Gary Powers, the spy. Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the guy who was, I think, charged the UN at one point in time. Martin Sheen, the true believer. Deion Sanders is such a fucking Leo. Am I right? Like, that guy is total Leo. Mr. Talking to the third person. I've actually gotten to like Sanders over the years. He's got some trouble, though, with his foot, man. He's got some clots. He may lose his foot yet. I hope he doesn't. But that'd be so humbling for a Leo. I'm not hoping that. I want Dion to be a successful person. I like Dion. I didn't used to like Dion. I like Dion. Herman Melville, who's related to Moby, right? Moby. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick. Moby the musician. His name is Richard Melville Hall. He's related to Herman Melville. His nickname is Moby from Moby Dick. Michelle Yeoh, the actress, she's a Leo. Who else do we have? Oscar Peterson, the great jazz musician. He actually walked into a restaurant that I was at one time, was working there. And he was playing at a jazz restaurant, at a jazz club in Seattle. And he walked in, and the owner of the restaurant recognized him and said hi to him. So, seemed like a nice guy. I think he's Canadian. Who else do we have? Peter Jennings. Speaking of Canadian, back to back. Shelley Winter, she's a total Leo. Put her in Lucille Ball camp in some ways. Sean Penn, Leo. Of course he is. Married to Madonna, Leo. Don't they cancel each other out? When you get two Leos together like that, don't they kind of cancel each other out? I would think that they would in some ways. Don Drysdale, great pitcher. He died too young. He died of a heart attack. He was announcing for the Montreal Expos. He had married Ann Myers, his basketball player, had two kids, and fucking he called a game and passed away in his hotel room. He went the way of a Leo, heart attack. That's how a lot of Leos go. They have heart attacks. Let's see who else. Helen Mirren. Of course she's a Leo. Let's see who else we have here. Steve Carell. I knew he was a Leo. Remember that. Apparently, nobody really liked him on the set of The Office, by the way. Martha Stewart's a Leo, of course. There's something like connected about Martha Stewart and Helen Mirren. Don't you think? Like there's something kind of weird going on here. Okay, Herb Brooks, coach of the hockey team. We've got some country western singers. We saw Martina McBride, Casey Musgraves, Hilary Swank. Didn't she play a country western singer? I think. Lawrence Fishburne, Leo. Lots of Bill Bradley wanted to be president, ran for president, didn't get there. Sergey Brin, one half of Google, the other being Larry Page. Carl Malone, Leo. Bill Parcells is definitely Leo, you can tell. Anthony Kennedy, the Justice, Leo. Roman Polanski, the director, looking somewhat like Dustin Hoffman. Of course he's a Leo. Casey Affleck. Oh, interesting. Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck are both Leos. We're getting into some twinning territory. Slash is a Leo. I knew that. Who else do we have? There's George Soros, Leo. Tony Trabert, another tennis player, Leo. Demi Lovato, Leo. Kim Cattrall, Leo. Vida Blue, God rest his soul, Leo. And what a name, right? For Leo, Vida Blue. Perfect name. Absolutely perfect. He just passed away. Vida was great. Let's see. Henry Knox, Leo. Earl Weaver, of course he's a Leo. So now we've got Leo DeRocher, Casey Stengel, and Earl Weaver, three of the greatest managers of all time. Leos. Alex Rodriguez, who's connected to J-Lo, and another Leo in sort of a weird triangle. What do you call the tri-sun connection with Ben Affleck, J-Lo, and Alex Rodriguez? Leo. Matthew Perry, another member of Friends. Now we got 3 Leos on Friends: Matt LeBlanc, Lisa Kudrow, and Matthew Perry. I love how astrology lines up, and you see these relationships between these people and the interconnectivity and the synchronicity. Shimon Peres, another guy that ran fucking Israel. Leo. Ken Norton the boxer, Leo. David Robinson, Leo. The admiral. He wasn't just the captain. He was the admiral. Speaking of generals, there's Norman Schwarzkopf right next to him. Jordan Spieth, the golfer. Jason Momoa, of course he's a Leo. Look at the fucking hair. Right? Leo. Charles Napier, interesting character. Leo. Liz Truss, who was president, like, wasn't she like the prime minister for a day or something? Like her reign, the reign of Liz Truss did not last very long. Liz, we hardly knew you. Leni Riefenstahl, who was the great filmmaker. Whatever you think of Hitler World War II, Leni Riefenstahl was a pioneer in cinema. And if you ever want to see an amazing movie, watch Will to Power by Leni Riefenstahl. And she actually did stuff with the Olympics. Was it 1932 Olympics? Jesse Owens, that Olympics. Like she did all kinds. She like did stuff where she was putting cameras like on the ground. So when you saw, they filmed the whole thing, of course. So when you saw the runners, you'd see the runners, running by you at an angle you had never seen before. They were putting cameras on like hot air balloons, looking down. I mean, she did shit. Cinematography that nobody else was doing at the time, right? Go big or go home. That's what we got here. Ted Hughes, the poet. Samuel Goldwyn, the studio head. Melvin Van Peebles, the director. Woody Harrelson, Leo. Seems like he should have been on Friends, except he was on Cheers. Gary Larson, the comic strip guy. Fatboy Slim, Norman Cook. Leo Fujimori, another leader, right? This was the Japanese guy who kind of ran Peru for a while. And they thought, oh, yeah, this Japanese guy can run it better than we can do it. It didn't really work out that way. Eva Majoli, another Leo. Paul Molitor, a tennis player. Great baseball player, Paul Molitor. Leo. Who else do we have here? Ogden Nash, the poet. Louis Vuitton. That's what he looked like. Didn't look too stylish there, but we got one more page. Anybody else interesting here? Let's see. Phil Schlafly, the great conservative, Leo. And the final page, Geddy Lee, the bass player from Rush. Of course, he's got the Leo hair. Nate Thurman, another great center, Leo. Let's see, who else do we have? Maureen McGovern. There's got to be a Morning After. That's a Leo song, isn't it? About the sun that's rising. Not to be confused with Maureen McCormick. They're the Affirmation, Kevin Spacey. Larry Ellison, another kind of tyrant, dictator. Loves tennis, right? He loves tennis. Milton Friedman, the famous economist. Rocky Colavito, Leo. Melinda Gates. Not the same person, but a Leo nonetheless. Marine Le Pen, the so-called conservative antidote to the fascism of the World Economic Forum. I don't think she'll ever become the president or prime minister of France. Charles Schwab, Leo. Who else do we have? Isabelle Allende. Didn't she rule for a while too? Leo. Coming down to the end, Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of my favorite photographers. Leo. Billy Cannon, the Heisman Trophy winner. Peter Bogdanovich, great director. Really great director. I think he passed away. Leo. Al Lopez, another manager. Coming down to the end here. Let's see. Anybody else interesting? Hoyt Wilhelm, who pitched fucking forever. Threw a knuckleball. Let's see. Anybody else? There's Karl Popper. Ryan Lochte, the swimmer. Leo. Isaac Hayes. Leo. Yeah. Alberto Salazar. Is he a distance runner or something? Leo. And anybody else interesting? Down here, pinning up the rear. Jack Buck, announcer. Jim Courier, another tennis player. Reed Hoffman, Silicon Valley guy. Who else? Ken Dryden, goalie. Leo. Richard Linklater, filmmaker from here in Texas. Did Dazed and Confused, Leo. So we see a lot of directors as Leos too. They're running the show, right? They're in charge of shit. They're in charge of the movie. They're in charge of the production. So James Cameron, Cecil B. DeMille, Leos. Hank Bauer, tennis player, Leo. Edward Norton, great actor, Leo. Let's see who else we're running. Wesley Snipes, Leo. Marvin Minsky, Leo. Garfield Sobers looks like he's a tennis player, Leo, another tennis player. Cantinflas, the famous Mexican actor, comedic actor, Leo. That's it. That's it. Them's your Leos. Them's your Leos. How about that? I like going through stuff. I love seeing patterns. And there's plenty of patterns there. Okay, looks like we're losing the light a little bit here. Let's see if we can. Why don't we do this? I'm going to put on a little, like 2 or 3 minute break thing. And I'm going to turn the lights on here. We come back. We're diving into Edgerton Pond when I get back. Okay, so we're going to do that. Let me put on. What do I have here? Let me see what I have. Why don't I just do. Let's see how long is this. I'll do this. It's just a minute long. That's all it is. When I come back, we'll get into the Edgerton Pond stuff. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Here we go. Let's play this. Oh. My bad. It's not what I wanted. What do I want? That's what I want. Here we go. There it is. It's a minute long, and it'll give me just enough time here to do what I need to do.
The show is about to start. Thank you for your cooperation. Enjoy the show, and please come back and visit us again.
All right, there we go. A little more light in the situation. So this is it. This is probably why you came to the show tonight, so that we can get into the murky material, right? So we're going into some strange depths here, and we're going to attempt to look at some of the celestial factors to see if they can give us some insight into what happened on July 24th when Tafari Campbell, who was the chef for the Obamas, died in Edgerton Pond, and he actually passed away in, if I'm not mistaken, 8 feet of water, and 100 yards away from, or 100 feet away from shore. And if you look at the thumbnail, you'll see that that Edgerton Pond is really more like a lake. And we've already gone over the fact that he knew how to swim, right? Like he demonstrated that he could swim. And apparently one of the things, this is what I've heard, was that he came to swimming later in life, which in some ways is not uncommon. Like my father taught himself how to swim in his 30s, believe it or not. But there's a video record of him swimming. Now, apparently there were people that tried to come to his, the whole thing is weird. I mean, you cannot talk about this without it being weird. The background for him, and I'm just giving you the background, is that he was their chef. Not only was he their chef, but he was a chef for George Bush, right? He goes all the way back to the Bush administration, and he's there in Washington, and the Obamas keep him on. And he was married to a gal that it was like his, sort of college age sweetheart. And they had 2 kids together. They had 2 twin boys, Xavier and Savian, or Savin, I think. Xavier and Savin. And Savin is actually an herb. I looked that up. So it's not like some kind of made up name. It's an herb. And we can speculate what might have happened. And there are a number of very strange details. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to keep those details out of what we're looking at and try to look at this strictly from an astrological perspective. right? Like there are things that, the one thing that we do know that is part of the details is when you look at the call log, there's no name associated or number associated with the call log, meaning the call that was made to the police department to report his death. And it was made outside of the property. Now, the Obamas have stated that they were not there, and now they've changed their story. Initially, it was like, we're not there. We were not, that's not true. They've had to recant their story. When that happens, right, you can tell generally that not everybody's on the same page. This is usually what happens. And that happens when there is an event that is chaotic, to say the least, right? So we know that much to be true at this point. Number one, he didn't have a lot of water in his lungs. Now, there are people that can say that it's called a dry drowning, or, whatever. We're dealing with Saturn and Pisces. If we're going to talk astrologically, we're Saturn and Pisces. And when I think of Saturn and Pisces, the term that comes to mind is the drowned god. That we're dealing with the immersion and submersion of the deity, right? This is what Saturn in Pisces represents. The drowned god, or the drowned spirit, right? And Saturn, though, again, brings with it an authority as well. So we've seen some bizarre happenings with Saturn in Pisces. Right out of the gate, we saw the movie The Jesus Generation. We talked about that. We talked about how with Saturn and Pisces, people are going to reaffirm their faith, because things are going to get fucking weird. If you can't surf with the weird, then you're gonna have to, like, put on your spiritual armor. There's only two ways you're going to get through this time. You're either going to be able to surf with the weird, or you're going to have to put your spiritual armor on. Because neither way. If you're not, and maybe you could do some of them together. And some people are capable of surfing the weird, and some people aren't. Some people are just like, this is too weird for me. I just gotta batten down the hatches, and it's like me and God right now. I was raised Catholic. I'm coming back. I don't give a shit about the Pope. I don't give a shit about the kids. I'm just coming back to this. People are going to do that, right? So we saw that, and then we started to see these orcas, these killer whales, like attacking people, which is some Saturn and Pisces-ish. And then, of course, we had Titanic, or the Titan, and this whole thing with the Titan and the immersion and Saturn and Pisces, and all the connections with Astro and the Federal Reserve and BRICS, and all this high strange going on right now, right? So it's part of the what I call the event canon, and this happens in the event canon with Saturn and Pisces. And one of the things I talked about on the Friday show with Russ Winter, this is aside from the astrology, which we're going to get into, is that this is an event that changes the timeline. Totally changes the timeline. If you go back and you look at Ted Kennedy, Chappaquiddick, like that changed the timeline. Ted Kennedy was fingered to be at some point president of the United States, right? John got shot, Bobby got shot, and who was left? It was Teddy. Changed the timeline. We never saw a Kennedy presidency. He primaried Carter, but that was about it, right? So people have been talking about Michelle Obama, being on a ticket for 2024. That's done. That's done. Like, there's no way now that Michelle Obama can get on. You call her Michelle, you call her Big Mike, whatever you feel like calling her, right? I don't care, right? She goes by Michelle, sounds a lot like Michael, but she can't be on the ticket now. If she is, the audacity, the absolute audacity that would be involved in something like that is just off the fucking charts. Now, they've made some statements, apparently. Obama was photographed playing golf. He did not look great. Again, I'm just telling you, he did not look great. He had his fingers taped up, and he had a glove on his right hand. So a lot of times people will play golf with golf. Usually it's gloves and not just one. But he had his fingers taped up, which sometimes it happened, I guess, in golf. But the other thing, it looked like he had gotten into a fight. Like you could see, looks like it was under his left eye. Looked like somebody had punched him. Something went down there besides, unfortunately, Tafari Campbell. And again, he left 2 kids and a woman behind, wife. And she said this, the words out of her mouth, this changes everything. Those are the words she said. And it does change everything. It totally changes everything. And if you look at what's been happening in DC and how literally it has been a ship of fools, right? It's like a ghost ship in a lot of ways. But somebody's been piloting that ship. We know it's not Joe Biden. It's not Joe Biden. So that means that the pilot of the ship, if we can intuit that the power behind the throne is Obama and Michelle and the people that are associated with them, like Val Jarrett and Susan Rice. We know the crew, right? John Podesta's probably somewhere in the mix. That position has been compromised. It's been totally compromised. And I don't think that there is any coincidence that within a couple of days after that happening, the Hunter Biden thing, which looked like it was all sewn up, is back up in the air again. Because the plea deal got rejected because the court said, no, you're not getting blanket immunity. So that is something, right? We're already seeing like the ripples of the what's happened, even though we don't specifically know what's happened. But it's changed the timeline. I would say that now we have shifted slightly off of the timeline. And how long or what it takes to recorrect and get back on that sort of Agenda 2030 World Economic Forum, basically destroy the economy and the infrastructure of America and the Western world timeline remains to be seen. Like, this is the monkey wrench of God. All right. And it's unfortunate that this dude had to die, especially since he has kids, but we're going to look at it now. So why don't I bring up his chart? Okay, he was born, guess what sign he is? He's a Pisces. Of course he's a Pisces. He was born on March 12th, 1978 in Dumfries, Virginia. And he has a grand trine. He's got a really interesting chart in a lot of ways. He's got a grand trine. Here, let me bring it up here. Let me show you guys. Again, I don't have his time. But I do have his date of birth and his birthplace. So I tried to kind of approximate in my own way. This is my rectification. And I thought, okay, how about Virgo rising? And we're going to put his sun kind of in the 6th house because he's a chef and he does something every day, right? So I did that. This is what I came up with. And he's got a grand trine. He's got Mars in Cancer, and he's got Mars trine Uranus. So I would say he's whatever you know or don't know about this guy. He's creative, right? He's creative. He's got a creative, especially with cooking, with Mars in Cancer, which is, has a lot to do with hospitality in the home, and he's got a creative side to him. He also has some other things going on here. He's got that Mars Pluto square, which is very intense. It's a pretty intense square, actually. And people that have Mars Pluto squares, sometimes they can approach life like it's life or death, right? That's what happens with Mars Pluto squares. You can get into a conflict where it feels like it's life or death. And it may just be a regular conflict, but generally, if you have a Mars Pluto square, what do you engage in? You're engaged in winning. Like that's what Mars Pluto, win at all cost. Now he has Mars in Cancer, so it's not going to be as straightforward as like Mars in a fire sign. Yeah, in fact, in Cancer, it's more complicated in a lot of ways. He's got a Mars Moon square, right? He's got Moon in Taurus, Mars at the edge of Cancer, and he's got Chiron. It's more the Mars Chiron square, but the Moon is in there as well. Right? We're going to get into the Moon a little bit more. He's got this Moon Uranus opposition. This Moon is going to play a role in our conversation here, moving forward. And the Moon Uranus square is swift, it's sudden, it's peculiar. Sorry, opposition. It's peculiar. So he is very, there's a part of this guy that is very measured and steady, right? There's a measured and steady part, even with Saturn. He's got this Saturn, interesting trine to Chiron. He's got a Saturn trine with Neptune. So there's a steady part of him. Saturn sextile with Jupiter. And he's got Saturn in Leo. So he's used to working for people that have power, right? He worked for Bush in the White House. He's worked for Obama. So that's Saturn in Leo, perfect placement for that kind of occupation. Squares Uranus. So I would say that one of the things that came out, which is interesting to talk about with this chart, is that apparently Michelle Obama had been very critical in writing him very hard. Please don't take that too intentionally, but had been writing him very hard. This is all kind of in the rumor mill. And I would say that again, he would be somebody that would be slow to anger. Mars Uranus he tried to find an interesting creative way to deal with conflict. But I think he would probably have his limits. And the limits are the Saturn Uranus square, which is finally like, fuck you, fuck it, I've had enough. And then the Mars Pluto square. Now, again, these details they're scant and they're very contradictory in a lot of ways. Like there's strange things. Now, I've heard that the Obama girls were the ones that were, I said I would not get into speculation, but here I am, that they were on the boards. In the pond. Somebody supposedly was on the back of his board. These are all parts of the story that have kind of leaked out, right? Also, he's got the South Node in Aries, Mercury in Aries, Venus in Aries. Look at this right here, right? So I think that, and again, I don't like to speak ill of somebody who's passed away. It's like I just, especially when he's left these kids behind. But I also feel like there's a part of him that also had some impulse control issues. Because we just talked about Aries, right? And Aries is not apologetic. It is not apologetic. And he has, like, there's a quick trigger here. And when you look at him, and I've looked at his face, and he's got a pretty kind face. So it's hard to judge people sometimes from their appearance, right? But he has some impulse control issues, or had, unfortunately. And Jupiter's going to square that. And some of it could just be could be very effusive. Very effusive. Maybe he's demonstrating his affection in a way that other people are not really cool with, right? Because Aries is just like, fuck it. I'm into it and I'm doing it and I'm doing it now. And I'm doing my own thing. And the Jupiter square makes it even bigger. And the Jupiter square is a risk taker here. So he is going to think and likely act on what he's feeling and what his will is guiding and directing him to do. In this regard, he's not very Piscean. In this regard, he's much more Aries. And there's even a stubborn quality and stubborn nature to his. I think this is his culinary stuff right here with the Jupiter sextile to Chiron in the moon. Like that's his culinary stuff, right? That's where he's making his bread and butter, right? And I think he's creative. He's got a creative potential here. Okay, now these are the transits for the 24th of July. Let's look at what was going on here. So the thing that really grabbed my attention was Pluto. And it was the Pluto has been retrograding, right? And it's opposing Mars in his chart. That's been kind of ongoing. He's already had it once. And it's retrograding. Goes back to 27, would be in a 5-degree orbit. Anytime you get into a Pluto-Mars opposition, it can be very intense and potentially even violent, right? Maybe even Mars-Pluto square to the death. Now, Pluto is not squaring here, but Pluto is retrograding back, and it's a slow retrograde, right? It's not like super rapid, and it's not, in an exact opposition with Mars, but it's there, right? It's there. We also see over here the Mercury on Saturn, Venus on Saturn, right? So there's something going on with Leo on his Saturn during this day. And then we've got the square to Uranus, which is swift, sudden, like this, something happens quickly. Something happens quickly here. And in his chart, I don't think he's really cool with whatever is happening. And again, I've heard rumors. I'm going to try to keep a lot of the speculation out of this, right? But again, when we look at Leo, what we were just talking about with Leo, we're talking about people that are dictatorial rulers and tyrants. And I feel like he's getting pressure. And it's like, well, just, sure, Venus and Mercury have been together on his Saturn before. Yeah, but maybe not that close, right? Maybe not that close. So he's getting pressure here, right? And dealing with authority. And he's got this square with Uranus. And I think that this to me is combustible. This is combustible. Neptune is over here, right? It's retrograding, and now it's retrograding and getting closer to his sun. We already know Saturn is here, right? It's retrograding. So we have Sun, Neptune, and Saturn, and the sun is not quite the midpoint, but it's in that mix, right? So the sun is kind of buried between Neptune and Saturn in his chart. And what's happening to him? He's drowning, or theoretically. Jupiter is on his moon, right? So, of course, what's going to happen there? It's going to make his emotional body bigger. Things are just going to get bigger, right? Responses are going to get bigger. We already saw that there's a square here. South Node just coming off of that conjunction with Chiron, moving into Aries, moving into this sign where he's probably feeling like, okay, well, I'm going to exert more of my own personal will here. But if we're looking at the kind of the telltale pieces around just this chart on this day, I think it's really the sun. Also here, the sun is just coming out of Cancer, and it's also part of this opposition with Pluto, right? It's just coming out of it. So we have the sun, very early Leo. What is that, 2 Leo? Zero Leo, Sun Pluto opposition, right there, right? It's right there. So what else is it doing? Well, certainly it's triggering his chart and him. Like we're all going through it, right? We're all going through the Sun Pluto opposition. But in this chart, clearly there's other things going on. You know, and he's got this Mars-Pluto square. And then the moon is conjunct his true node, which is in Libra. That's interesting too. This, to me, I think the big mover and shaker in this chart is Pluto. It's Neptune retrograding, moving back into a closer position with his sun, right? And then this whole Saturn piece. All right, so this is just kind of looking, and again, I don't know his birth time. The Sun-Pluto opposition, I mean, let's say, for instance, he was an Aquarius rising, and he had Pluto on his ascendant, again. And then he had the Sun over, you know, in his 7th house. I mean, that's possible. That could be possible. And then that Sun-Pluto opposition, if it's on one of the angular placements, holy shit, that's a big opposition. And again, I do not know the time of his birth chart. If I wanted to, I could have rectified it like that. But that's how intense that Sun-Pluto opposition is. All right, that's his chart. So now we're going to get into some of the relationships. Let's look at him and Obama. Actually, this is Obama, and these were the transits for July 24th. So this is what was going on in his chart. Again, and I'll share that story with you guys that I wrote a long time ago. So here's Obama's chart, Aquarius rising. There's again this idea of leading from behind. Neptune is the highest planet in his chart. And to some degree, this does make some sense, although I did peg him as a Scorpio rising with Neptune in the first. But if this is true, right, if this chart is true, then what do we have? We have Pluto in Obama's 12th house. And it's just coming off of a conjunction with Jupiter, and it's moving backwards to retrograde and conjunct with Saturn at 27, which is where we'll end up. So if this chart is anywhere close to his birth time, Pluto in the 12th house it's not anything to dismiss, especially when it comes to something like a drowning and a death, right? Okay, so there's that. Look where Mars is. Mars was right on Obama's Pluto. Doesn't matter what house it's in, right? That's intense, right? A Mars-Pluto conjunction's intense. And we saw that Tafari Campbell had a Mars-Pluto square. So we got a Mars-Pluto square in the chart and Mars conjuncting Obama's Pluto. When I look at this, I'm like, whoa, okay, this is on this day. Something was going on with Obama. Something intense was happening here. Not only that, but we're also talking about a Saturn opposition. So Saturn is opposing Obama's Pluto. He's got Chiron in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, right? We're talking about death by drowning. This is a pretty heavy fucking chart for what's going on here. Like there's more. Clearly, there's something going on with Tafari Campbell. There's more happening here. Like if you're looking for footprints, these, my friends, are astrological footprints. The Pluto retrograde in the 12th, if we consider this the chart. The conjunction moving towards Saturn in the 12th, right, which is hidden. The Mars-Pluto conjunction, Mars opposing Saturn, Saturn on Chiron. This is heavy. Like these are heavy, heavy aspects for this chart. Heavy aspects. Then we throw in Uranus, right? And then Uranus square. Uranus square. He's got Uranus and Leo. There's Uranus squaring Uranus, right? That's generational. I have it as well. That's going on. Jupiter squaring his sun. You know, when you get into Jupiter sun squares, what do? Right? They embolden you. They embolden people to do things that they haven't really It's like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll take a chance, right? It is the gambler's square when Jupiter squares your sun. It's not always a great risk either. Like there's a lot going on here. The sun was bearing down. And again, according to this chart, we're talking 2 Mercury Leo, right? So the sun was bearing down on Mercury, which meant that it was illuminating conversations. Things were being said. And at that point, we have the Sun-Jupiter opposition. A lot of oppositional energy going on here. There's a lot of tension in this chart. Now, if you believe that this is the chart, or at the very least the chart, if not the birth time, and we're going on this as part of the record, there's a lot happening here. A lot happening. And again, when you see the opposition, it's like literally pulling the chart apart. That Chiron's at what, 519? We're going to look that up in the Sabian symbols here. And he has a south node at what, 27 Aquarius. Interesting. Very interesting. Moon in Gemini, of course. Of course, the moon in Gemini. He's got a square with Pluto. Man, that's an intense square. You know, Moon-Pluto squares are obsessive. I've talked about this before. They're obsessive. You know, and obsessive, and there's kind of a compulsive nature with Moon-Pluto squares. And in Gemini, you know, you've got like split personalities, 2 identities. I mean, he really has 2 identities, right? He's Barry Soetoro and Barack Obama. It's very Gemini-like. Man, what's going on in this chart on this day is very intense. Very, very intense. Now, Saturn's going to retrograde, go back to 0, but it's going to come back again next year. So I would say that there's probably going to be another chapter to all this. And when Pluto comes back to 0 Aquarius, right, it's going to be oppositional to Mercury here. So you've not heard the end of this story. This is it may have like taken a back seat to some of these other, you know, stories in the news cycle, but you haven't heard the end of this. This is not going to go away. I guarantee you, because of the retrogrades. And even Venus retrograding, which is here, it stops right on Barack Obama's sun. So Venus is going to station right at 12 degrees. Like, I would not be surprised if there are things that are going to come out around this, some of which may not make any sense. It may make no sense at all. He's got the Sun-Neptune square, which again is deceptive. Like, you know, his son Barack Obama has a tortured son. I'm telling you right now, if this is his chart, the only thing he has is a square with Neptune. I don't think anybody really knows who he is. Does he know who he is? Maybe. But outside of that square to Neptune, he's got nothing. Nothing. And guess what's going to happen? Venus is going to station right on there. Right on his sun. Through the retrograde. You have not heard the end of this. And one of the things I did hear is that they did not want the Massachusetts police to do the autopsy. They wanted the DC police to do that. High strange, right? This has a lot going on. There's a lot happening in this chart. And a lot of it is oppositional and very intense. And we haven't heard the end of the story. Just wait. Wait for that retrograde at 12. Now, whether or not people will believe it, or whether it'll be in the realm of speculation, innuendo, conspiracy, that's a whole other deal. But it's not going to go away. Let's look at the Sabian symbol for 5-6 Pisces. Hmm. Let me go back here. Give me one sec. Five. It's interesting because 4 Pisces in the Sabian symbols is heavy car traffic on a narrow isthmus linking 2 seashore resorts. That's kind of interesting based on the fact that you've got Martha's Vineyard and then you have, what is it, Nantucket or whatever on the other side, right? Like, that's an interesting symbol to have at 4 Pisces, right? So the other, his symbol is 5 Pisces and it's retrograde, so it's going backwards. So it's going back to that 4 Pisces. Let's read 4 Pisces. This is an intuitive sort of take here on all of this. So the Sabian symbol for 4 Pisces is heavy car traffic on a narrow isthmus linking 2 seashore resorts. The mobility and intensity of interchange, which make possible and characterize complex social processes. Here we see the concept of commerce and social interaction in a new form. What is stressed is the need to establish unceasing dynamic relationships between all aspects and functions of the social life. The more complex the relationships, the more dynamic and restless the society. In this symbol, the isthmus refers to a geographic situation found near San Diego, California, where the Sabian symbols were produced. Well, maybe. Also in Florida and elsewhere, a narrow strip of land separates the sea from a lagoon, and on this strip, houses are built and roads are constantly filled with moving cars. The proximity of the sea stresses the collective nature of social experiences and what may appear to be individual achievements. This 4-stage symbol evokes many aspects of what at several levels can be called traffic. The technique for achieving social results is always based on an interchange of ideas and interplay of activities. However, confusion ensues and traffic jams are ever-present possibilities. So 5 is a church bazaar, which is like a rummage sale at the church, right? And kind of, in some ways, secularizing the church experience. Interesting. Okay. So let me do this. Let's get out of here. All right. So let's look at some other stuff here. What else do I have? So this was their charts together. This is synastry between Obama and Tafari Campbell. So Obama is on the inside and Tafari Campbell's on the outside. So we see Saturn, Uranus, right? There's that Saturn, Uranus. And what did we see? We saw Mercury and Venus conjuncting Saturn and conjuncting Uranus. Remember that? That was literally the traffic jam, right? So that's significant. That is significant, right? That's significant. And then what else do we have here? Jupiter, Venus, there's opportunity. I would say giving him opportunity, money, connection. Tafari Campbell's true node and Pluto, again, theoretically, if this is Obama's chart, are in his 8th house, which is the house of death in the underworld. And we have, more importantly, oppositional energy, right? Mars, right here, Mars, that's his Mars in Virgo. What's it doing? It's opposing Tafari Campbell's sun. So we have oppositional energy. Sun in Pisces, Mars in Virgo. what did we see on that day? Right? What did we see? We saw intensity. We saw Mars on Obama's Pluto right here. Here's that's the transiting Mars. That's the natal Mars. There's Tafari Campbell's sun on the other side. Oops. That's oppositional energy. Mars Pluto, not far away. Kind of a wide conjunction. Very interesting. T square, Mars, Jupiter, Sun. So if anything, right, if anything, to me, this opposition is literally opposition. This is definitely some degree of conflict, right? And then you throw Mars, Pluto here in the mix. And then Saturn on top of Uranus. We saw all, those planets, Venus, Mercury, Black Moon, they're all here. All here. So this is fairly complex, and especially in light of the transits that were going on that day. Interesting. Tafari Campbell has a moon in Taurus, which we've seen, and that's opposing Obama's Neptune, right? So there's some oppositional energy. These are key planets here. Also, Mars, Saturn. Here's his Mars. There's Saturn over here. What did we see? We saw Pluto retrograde. We talked about that. Opposition, opposition, opposition. Opposition is conflict. Squares are conflict. And even here, Uranus Sun square. So did they get along? Was there look, if you work for somebody for 8 years plus 4 years, so he was with the Obamas for like 8, 4, so that's 12. And then in 2023, so 15 years. He worked for the Obamas for 15 years. It's a long time. It's just a little over 2 Saturn cycles. Well, it is 7.5 years. It is 2 Saturn cycles. Something happened. Something definitely happened. And I would say the astrology here is fairly explosive. Just saying. All right. So what about Michelle? This is a way more complex relationship. Really complex. Now, to me, if there is some validity to the fact that he'd gotten tired of her nitpicking and kind of being too much of an authoritarian, I could see it in this chart. You know where I see it? Right here. So this is Michelle on the inside, right? Saturn, Moon, Venus, Pisces, and Saturn. They had a Saturn opposition. That is really oppositional energy, right? Very oppositional energy. And during this time, right, where's Saturn in Michelle's chart? Let's go in. Okay, so Michelle Obama has Venus at 0 Pisces. What did I say? When Saturn goes to 0, like even in Obama's chart, it's there. You can see this. Like when Saturn goes to 0, this is kind of a big deal in Michelle Obama's chart. It's going to retrograde and it goes back to 0 in November. What else should in Pisces? Venus. That moon's in Aquarius, isn't it? So Pluto, where's Pluto in her chart? Pluto is going to retrograde back onto her sun. Wow. Wow. So these retrogrades are going to be part of the story for both Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Pluto's going to retrograde back to her sun. Very intense. And then it's going to go direct and it's going to conjunct her Mars in 2024. But I don't think, I mean, if Michelle Obama wanted to run for president or was going to be on a ticket, with Pluto on her Mars now, it's almost impossible. Or then, pardon my sequence of events there. She has Saturn in a 22 Aquarius. His Saturn's a 25 Leo. There's conflict in this chart, right? Even here, like this is his Venus, Mercury South Node, right? And she's got that Mercury in Capricorn, and they're in conflict. Now, he could probably handle some of this emotionally for a while, sure, but we have, intense, fixed, oppositional energy, and then here, right, the square. And eventually he's going to say no, right? He's not going to be polite. He's not going to do the true node in Libra trip and go along to get along. This is not going to happen here. And her Jupiter is right in the mix, right? Her Jupiter is at 12 Aries. So it's wide conjunction. So they're both connected to him in different ways. And I think for Obama, especially on the 24th, that is a series of transits and conjunctions fraught with tension. There's already tension in this chart. Man, at some point that somebody's got to win with that Saturn opposition. It's just that's the nature of it, right? And even his Mars. Look at his Mars. His Mars opposes her Sun, right there. And she's got that kooky Mars in Aquarius. I would say that there was some professional courtesies here. He could probably make things work, but I don't think these are two people that got along. They did not get along. So why would somebody be in the employ of people? Maybe they paid really well. Maybe there's a whole other side to Tafari Campbell that, is much more connected to Venus and Mercury and that South Node in Aries. And even the Piscean Sun hidden behind all that stuff, right? But this is a chart that is definitely fraught with oppositional tension. Okay. And this was what was going on for Michelle that day. There's Mars coming in hot on Pluto and Uranus, right? She's a little bit older than Obama, or a little bit younger than Obama, theoretically. Obama's got that Uranus and Leo. She's got the conjunction. There's Mars. And then the opposition. These were people, both of them, I would say, Obama and Michelle Obama were highly triggered on this day. Big trigger. Big trigger. Look at Pluto right there, right? That doesn't even take into account Tafari Campbell. Sun in opposition, right? Just coming into opposition, oppositional energy. Oppositional energy. Wow. Pretty intense. I don't know what her birth time is. I gave her a sunrise chart. But again, you can see the oppositions and you can see where these planets are coming in hot, especially Mars. Ooh. Mars and Virgo. Interesting. So there you go. That is the strange case of Tafari Campbell and two of the main figures that are associated and connected with it astrologically. And clearly there is some conflict, stress, tension, heat going on in those charts with the transits. So, what do you think? You know, if you know a little bit about astrology and can see sort of where these things are sparking, triggering, setting things off, leave a comment. You think I'm being distasteful and not respecting Tafari Campbell? Leave a comment. It's okay, right? Because I guess where you won't hear the comments in the mainstream media, you won't hear them. So you can just say, well, astrology is bullshit. You're just making a bunch of stuff up and you're making the next president look bad. You can think that too. I think there's a there there. I think based on what we're seeing, there's conflict. There is conflict. Conflict arose. I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened, but where there's smoke, there's some fire, and there's some smoke in those charts. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to take you back in time. I want to go to my website, and I'm going to show you the very first piece I wrote about Obama and how water plays a significant role. And let me see if I can do a search here. Probably do it on my own. Let's do this. Let's do this. Working on it. Let's see. Man, I did a lot with Obama back in the day. But I really want to look at the first one. Let's see. I really thought that the Gulf crisis was going to impact Obama's presidency more than I thought, more than it did. Man, a lot of Obama here. Let's see. I had all these crazy images too. I had this big series on Pluto and Capricorn called The Melting Economy. Obama versus Leo. Obama Leo versus Sarah Palin Aquarius. It's all in the stars, part 27. Aquarian, Aryan bloodlines, Princess Diana's archetypal resonator related. Man, I was into this shit. Let me go all the way back. Part one. I did all these like serial. Let me see. Is it this one? Here. It's part one. I got to go all the way back to part one. This is it right here. So this is what I was writing. This was back in 2008, September 2nd. And this was the image that I was using to write this piece. It was this image right here. Looking back on it, it almost looks photoshopped in some ways, but let me bring it up here. So this was the image that was one of our first views of Obama. Right here. Remember this image? So when I saw this, I thought to myself, this is like archetypal. This is back when he was just starting to run for president. And he looks a lot beefier than he does now. Like he's like really super skinny now. Even his arms look a little bit bigger. And I thought to myself, this is the perfect image to announce a candidate because he's literally emerging out of our collective unconscious, and that he is the representation of something new, right? Like he has just been baptized by Neptune's eternal waters. The salt in the water has cleansed and purified whatever remnants of his humanity, right? Tainted humanity he's bringing ashore with him. But nobody really knew who he was. So literally, he is emerging from the sea of our imagination. And we can print what we want to onto him. What's interesting about this story is it's called Write on an Empty Canvas. This is where, I don't know where this is from. Barack Obama and David Bowie might show up. This was kind of like what was in the air at that time. And so when people saw this, it was almost like, the return of the Fisher King or the second coming of Christ, right? Because we think of Christ as being Piscean and emerging, from these Piscean waters of our spiritual imagination. And to me, this was so archetypal and went even beyond Kennedy in his shorts, like signing autographs on the beach. So this is what I wrote about the whole thing. Let's not kid ourselves. This election isn't about John McCain versus Barack Obama or Sarah Palin versus Joe Biden. It's about Palin versus Obama, the first generation zero showdown in a presidential election. For those out of the know, Gen Zero or Gen Z, as I lovingly refer to it, is the subgeneration born between 1958 and 1966, sandwiched, I needed a proof or editor back then, between the Boomers and Gen X. The theme song for this back-end Boomer cast is Richard Hell's Blank Generation, which neatly sums up many Gen Z attitudes by cynically spitting out, triangles were falling at the window as the doctor cursed. He was a cartoon long forsaken by the public eye. The nurse adjusted her garters, and as I breathed my first, the doctor grabbed my throat and yelled, God's consolation prize. That's from Blank Generation by Richard Hell. This pretty much says it all as this, my subgeneration, the second child at the table when the fat of the lamb is being carved up. The boomers got there first and capitalized on the savings that their Depression-era mommies and pappies salted away and started buying land and cheap real estate before the Gen Zers were able to get in on the credit train. Well, the boomers came of age in the anything goes 60s. Gen Zero was weaned on the acid reflux of Vietnam, the fall of Nixon, and the impotence of Carter. Needless to say, influenced by the values of the 60s, their playground looked a lot less promising when we came of age. Instead of the Beatles and Love Is All You Need, we got Led Zeppelin and a whole lot of love, loosely translated into The Shaft. And really, that's what's Robert Palmer was saying. You're going to get a whole lot of love, which is The Shaft, right? And the cloudy haze of self-searching through the supermarket of drugs, franchised by their elders. They also didn't really get the benefit of the greed is good Reagan era that Gen X trumped into the dot-com startups, IPOs, and conspicuous consumption. Trying to live up to the spiritual values that most of the boomers had abandoned, hello, Bill Clinton, in favor of hardcore capitalism, hello, Jerry Rubin, and late to the game when it came to an obsession with gadgets and video games, hello, Sean Fanning. This is the generation that Obama and Palin represent, and will leave its imprint on America and the world for at least the next 4 years. Obama and Palin could not be more different, as represented by their astrological makeup, and yet they still mirror the zeitgeist. So this is what I talk about with Obama. Let's start with Obama. He is Leo personified. There is no denying that the man loves adulation, and the Messiah program that's being run out for him makes him all the more malleable as it appeals to his Leo ego in a very, very big way. What's interesting about Obama is because he has such a debate and gray area surrounding his birth time certificate, etc., it's difficult to pin him down about where the planets fall and angles meet. Based upon what I have seen, he's been cast as a Scorpio rising and as an Aquarian rising, but due to the controversy surrounding his birth chart, it's difficult to get a fix on him. Sound familiar? The Aquarian rising chart has him being born in Hawaii, but the other rising suggests a different birthplace. Some have mentioned Canada, while there's Kenya. Based on what I know and feel, I believe Obama is a Scorpio rising. That said, he has Neptune in Scorpio sitting nearly on top of his ascendant. That's with that chart. This is critical as it transmits the experience of Obama as Messiah to the masses. You can see that with Neptune in the 9th house as well, by the way. With Neptune in Scorpio greeting the world at large, people are apt to project feelings of religiosity and worship onto him, and let's not detract from the fact that he can be incredibly inspiring. So it is easy for people to want to put their faith in him. Whenever a planet like Pluto, Uranus, in this case Neptune, sits on the ascendant, the person with such an alignment has the ability to impact the world at large. They can appear almost transpersonal, channeling energies that are at times suprahuman. But as always, these qualities have their shadowy doppelganger. In Obama's case, it's delusion, both his own and those that worship at the altar of Barrio. There can be an almost pathologically disingenuous quality that someone with Neptune right in his rising sign would display. There can also be heavy skeletons in the closet, ones that involve sex and drugs. And lastly, since Neptune often represents Jesus Christ, Jesus/Christ, age of Pisces, it's also a sacrificial alignment, the sign of the martyr, the hanged man. Barack Obama, for all of his elevated inspiration and ability to rally the masses, could also become a fall guy or a Christ-like figure, crucified for some other agenda, not predicting, just saying. So I get into the breakdown of his chart, right? So Joyce Hopewell had the Scorpio rising for Obama. So I got into all of this, right? This was a big thing with that chart. And I got comments and stuff. So this is what I was doing back then, right? This was September 2nd, 2008. And I guess you could say I was kind of on the case in my own way. All right. That'll do it, I think, for tonight. We covered a lot of bases. We've been here for 3 hours and 19 minutes. I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you really for being here. I really appreciate your showing up here on Sunday night. And mods, thank you so much for all of your help and assistance. And I just want to say how much I love and appreciate everybody that I haven't met or I have met or have had connection with and will have connection with. I want to put that in there as well. And I hope to see as many of you as I can on October the 13th, 14th, and 15th here in the Hill Country. It's on my website. I will get those images sorted out, and I'm going to really start to push the event as soon as that's done. So I have something representative of what I think the event is. And that's about it, I think. True Hemp Science, the link is in the description for the show. If you want some great CBD, please go there. Support our friend Chris. Spend $100, type in 15MINS, and you'll get free product with your CBD. Make an appointment, call him up. He's happy to talk to you about his product. You get $150. We get you free shipping, money back guarantee after 30 days. And that's really about it. Thank you all so much for being here. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to see what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take good care, and bye for now. We'll see you on Tuesday for 15 Minutes of Flame. Ciao.